The filmmakers make her look like a hypocrite. Why am I watching her plotline for half of the movie? What a missed opportunity. Why would Bob almost say that? What separates The Incredibles 1 from Incredibles 2 then? What is the ending to your movie? Hi, I'm back. And almost 6 years ago, when I saw Incredibles 2 in theaters on opening weekend, I didn't like it.
You even hear yourself?
I know! It made a lot of money. Critics and audiences enjoyed it, and it's Pixar.
I sound crazy!
Yet, walking out of the theater, I would have told you it was somewhat bad.
It is crazy!
That deserves an in-depth explanation. This video is pretty long. If you don't have the time, we'll start with a quick plot setup and summary of my opinion. Then, the meat of this video will be a massive spoiler section, which will expand on those criticisms in exhausting detail, followed by a channel update and outtakes. Despite its length, this video is not a chronological breakdown of the entire movie. It is a topic-based opinion piece, concentrating on the stuff that matters to me. How well, in my opinion, did Incredibles 2 work as a sequel, treat its characters, and structure its storylines?
Let's do it!
Incredibles 2 picks up right where the first film left off 13 and a half years before. The Super Par family finally gets it on with the Underminer, causing tons of damage to the city and the reputation of superheroes. Luckily, a tech millionaire named Winston Dever and his talented sister, Evelyn Dever, love supers and want to change public perception. They recruit Mrs. Incredible to be the poster girl in their illegal campaign to legalize superheroes again. I didn't know that hadn't happened already. Meanwhile, a jealous, though supportive, Mr. Incredible must learn what it takes to be a stay-at-home dad. Whoa. Taking care of Violet, Dash, and baby Jack Jack, whose surfacing powers are getting crazy. On top of all of that, a new villain, the Screenslaver, emerges with the ability to hypnotize people's minds through their television screens. Can Helen figure out the identity of the Screenslaver and halt his attacks on automated transportation? And will Bob be able to manage the family without Helen?
Really?
Incredibles 2. I didn't like it. The visuals are top-notch. It's a huge detail upgrade compared to the first. The action? Well choreographed. And there are nice, touching, and humorous moments with the Par family. The movie overall just felt redundant. It intentionally regresses the story growth from The Incredibles 1.
Superheroes are illegal.
Then reuses some of that movie's plot structure to ultimately end up in the exact same place that the first one ended. On top of that, the action, while exciting at first, got repetitive. The villain mystery is telegraphed, so why have it be a mystery? Tension is lackluster, the threat can be easily thwarted, but to extend the climax, it isn't. And no one is allowed to get hurt. Many blows were exchanged, no lasting impact. The movie is cluttered and unfocused. It introduces so many interesting story elements, but it has little time to develop each one. As a consequence, there are abrupt off-screen developments to speed things along. It drags anyway, and it is perhaps too adult-oriented in its meeting room politics, while also being less threatening and more kid-friendly than the first. That's a bipolar mix! Tons of attention is paid to baby Jack Jack. He's cute. At first, but he isn't old enough to be an active character yet. Poor Dash is underutilized, and Violet's subplot, revolving around her wanting her parents to trust her, is actually very good, yet muddled, detouring into a misunderstanding about Tony Rydinger. Frozone is cool, but he doesn't get much to do. Edna is here, doing the same things as the first movie. The main characters are Mr. and Mrs. Incredible. They have a classic role reversal setup. Helen goes to work, Bob stays home with the kids. It's predictable, yet okay, but there isn't a conclusion, and Mr. Incredible seems to be the only one struggling with his reversed role. I assume this was done to allow Mrs. Incredible to shine for all the little girls in the audience to look up to. That is sweet, but they went too far, and now Helen doesn't have much of an internal conflict over leaving her family for superheroing, something she was passionately against in the first film.
But this, our family, is what's happening now, Bob. And you are missing this.
So, while action-packed, her half of the movie is less interesting and relatable than good old Bob, who is exaggeratedly thrown through the ringer. The contrast in competency between the two is off-putting, especially since they seem like equals in the first movie. Finally, there are 3 or 4 seizure tests throughout the movie. I've never had a seizure, but scenes of flashing lights are uncomfortable to me. I tended to look away until they were over. They've been toned down on the home video release. Incredibles 2 is an okay or kinda good time, particularly if you want more of the same or haven't seen the first one in a while. With so many story elements going on at one time, Incredibles 2's content is a lot more varied than the first. Not liking a storyline? It's cutting back to the other in a few minutes. I can understand how this cross-cutting, visual variation, improved graphics, and bigger character roster could make Incredibles 2 your preferred version of Incredibles 1. And despite the retconning, I was enjoying the first half, but then the second half shifts its attention to Screenslaver and Jack. All the underdeveloped plot points are trying to pay off, but I don't care. All the tension disappears, and Mr. and Mrs. Incredible, the main characters, role swap, got lost in the shuffle. By the time it was over, I was wondering, what was the point? I'd say Incredibles 2 is somewhat bad, because the movie has many good or great aspects, moments that are worth watching and revisiting. But overall, after a fun first half, it all became very dull to me. Couple that with a dissatisfying conclusion and that, as a sequel, it felt redundant, I came away slightly negative.
You have all these great components to a meal. There's inevitably the guy who stirs it all together into a mush and then eats it, and I always go, ugh! You know, individually, all these things were great. Mushed together, ugh!
Well said, Mr. Bird. When it comes to Brad Bird and Pixar, I thought The Incredibles 1 was good, if slow in places, and Ratatouille has grown on me a lot. This one lost me along the way. The rest of this review will contain full spoilers. For those who want to skip around to a certain topic, timestamps below. Time to go in depth with The Incredibles 2. It's going to be a long one. First off, the story has regressed.
Superheroes are illegal.
It's going the wrong direction.
The Incredibles was a self-contained story for 13 and a half years, with a satisfying ending. I always knew that the Syndrome robot incident somehow paved the way for superheroes to be legal again. Rick Dicker, even if he couldn't say for certain, had a very reassuring tone.
People of this country are indebted to you.
Does this mean we can come out of hiding?
Let the politicians figure that one out. We'll take care of everything else. You did good, Bob.
That, plus the time jump forward a few months and the triumphant expressions on the Parr family's faces as they donned their costumes, got me pumped. Superheroes are back. Let's go. Get 'em. Granted, it was ambiguous.
Let the politicians figure that one out.
If only because the legalization didn't happen on screen, but it was heavily implied. Why else would the Parr family so confidently all have their suits with them in public? As a viewer, I always thought that the limo scene left legalization ambiguous for 2 story-related reasons. 1, realism. Legalization would take a few months, at least, in a cartoon world. And 2, impactful visual storytelling. Revealing that supers are legal again in a conversation in a limo? Lame. And rushed. Revealing that supers are legal again by jumping forward a few months and having the Parrs don their costume in public? It's an exciting cherry-on-top moment before the credits roll. Well, Incredibles 2 retcons this happy ending.
Superheroes are illegal.
Bummer. During a dinner table discussion, Mr. and Mrs. Incredible, Bob and Helen respectively, find themselves on different sides of the issue. I enjoyed this as a story idea. Parents with differing political opinions and the confused kids that are caught in between them. But Helen's beliefs in the scene cause an inconsistency with the first film's ending.
If laws are unjust, there are laws to change them. Otherwise, it's chaos.
Which is exactly what we have.
If Helen doesn't believe in breaking the no superhero law, then why did she let the whole family bring their suits out in public in the first place? Huh, Helen? You look pretty happy here. This was clearly premeditated. They would have had to have been wearing their costumes underneath their civilian clothes for weeks in anticipation of something.
You said things were different now.
And they were. On the island.
This on the island excuse feels pretty disingenuous. Is Helen just telling a white lie to the kids to protect them? Clearly something had changed until it hadn't. To add more confusion, Helen says this.
Wait, should we be doing this? It is still illegal.
The filmmakers are trying to have it both ways. They want superheroes to still be illegal and to pay off the cliffhanger of Incredibles 1. They want Bob and Helen to know supers are still illegal, because why wouldn't they know it? But Helen has to be the motherly voice of reason, so she has a leg to stand on in the dinner table scene, yet still participate in illegal activity and have the kids in matching outfits, which would only encourage them to take action too!
We did it!
Oh, what did we do?
Why were they carrying around the kids' suits? Just to protect the kids' identities in case Bob and Helen broke the law someday? Was Helen pro-law breaking for the greater good? She was in The Incredibles 1. Was her opinion changed by the opening of this movie? Probably. I mean, a mother's children being taken into custody can be persuasive. I'll give the movie that. But then her opinion quickly changes back when she agrees to be the Devers poster girl. What about the kids now? She has a throwaway comment about it at the sink.
It's not that simple, Bob. I want to protect the kids.
But the movie never delves into the potential outcome. If she goes to jail, the kids will grow up without a mother. That could have been a source of tension, a real threat. Helen contending with the screenslaver while also ducking from the law. Instead, supers feel pretty legal the whole entire time. It devalues the cause that Helen is fighting for. You could just park your bike right out in the open. It's not like the city would be looking for you after the opening scene. I guess it's the act of superheroing, not being a superhero, that is illegal, but no attempt is made to arrest her after the fact either. She's booked on a newscast.
Ms. Elastigirl, they're ready for you.
Madam Ambassador, hello.
You are Elastigirl!
Superheroes have been in hiding, forced into it by a society no longer willing to support them.
I have the criminal with me who saved the train. Come and get her.
Hello, Chad.
Why are they doing this interview live instead of pre-recorded? With pre-recording, there would have at least been an illusion that the news station was trying to protect her. Where is the threat in this world building? My argument is not that this is a plot hole. It isn't. The movie itself explains exactly why Helen is allowed to break the law.
Are you sure the police are going to be okay with this?
I know the chief of police. There won't be a problem.
My argument is that this spews chunks. The movie spends all this time establishing that supers are still illegal. The family gets arrested. Bob and Helen yell about it. Helen must fight against it. She could go to jail.
Jail, Bob.
Yet as soon as Helen starts on duty, Winston literally hand waves all that buildup away.
I know the chief of police. There won't be a problem.
Wow. Thanks. Not to mention that this implies a corrupt collusion between DevTech, the police, the media, and a politician to prop up a criminal and overturn the law of the land. But hey, it's all in how you look at it.
Perfectly positioned to make some wrong things right.
I mean, it's one thing if the cops are convinced that the law was unethical and thus refuse to enforce the law, taking a moral stance, protesting in solidarity with their community. However, if the cops stand down because you're best friends with their chief and called in a favor? A minor detail with major moral implications. Am I right, Helen?
Don't wait for permission. Assert yourself and impose your will on the status quo.
Anyway, let's get back to the dinner scene. I don't like how worked up Helen gets defending the law.
That's the law. Respect the law. If laws are unjust, there are laws to change them.
When she was fine breaking it earlier and will continue to break it going forward.
Okay.
Did we do something wrong?
Yes.
I understand where Helen's coming from. They broke the law.
Whether it's fair or not, that's the law.
She wants the kids to know that that is serious and to never do it again. I understand where Bob is coming from.
We didn't do anything wrong.
They meant well.
The law should be fair.
There's a moral gray area about the law's fairness.
What are we teaching our kids?
He wants the kids to strive for justice, but me and the kids are searching for the inconsistency.
Are we going to talk about it?
You're referring to today.
Yeah, what's the deal with today?
Which one of you got me arrested? Who was wrong? They both were. Bob was wrong legally and is struggling to explain himself properly.
But we're supposed to help if there's trouble.
Well, yeah.
Aren't you glad we helped today?
Yeah, I know, but...
He knows on some level what he did was wrong, even if he meant well. Honesty and self-reflection is taking place in his stammering.
You said that you were proud of us.
Well, yeah, I was.
He's not prepared to lie, yet not fully prepared to tell the truth. Helen, despite her earlier hesitancy,
Should we be doing this?
was wrong legally too.
We want to fight bad guys.
No, you don't.
She puts up a stern defense to protect her kids. It's admirable, but dishonest. She's not reconciling to the kids why it's important to follow the law if she just broke it. Helen doesn't admit that she agreed with Bob, but recently changed her mind because of their arrest. Instead of her being self-reflective and forthright about this, she takes a deflective approach to the situation.
Can we just eat the dinner while it's hot?
Did we do something wrong?
They are confused.
No. We didn't do anything wrong.
I can sympathize with why Bob gets upset with her. Helen doesn't trust the kids with the concept of a moral gray area, which Bob was struggling to not have to explain. Rather, she authoritatively shuts down their curiosity.
Can we just eat?
She is being condescending toward them. I guess this comes down to a disagreement in parenting strategies. Do you present a strong front? The law is the law, and that's that.
What are we teaching our kids?
To respect the law.
But come off like an authoritative hypocrite? Or do you foster your kids' curiosity? Try to explain adult concepts of moral gray, which may get the kids in trouble. After all, they're kids.
Kids are stupid.
Helen is doing the former, shutting it down.
We didn't do anything wrong.
Whether it's fair or not.
Helen understood that he meant fairness, yet
that's the law.
Acts dismissive toward the issue, an issue that her husband is visibly angry about.
Even when the law is disrespectful?
If laws are unjust, there are laws to change them. Otherwise, it's chaos.
Helen raises her voice to meet Bob's instead of calming Bob down.
Which is exactly what we have.
She slams her hands on the table violently to stop the conversation. A conversation that could have shortly turned against her for defending the law that she just broke, without reconciling to the kids why they broke it. Instead, she threatens Bob with violence like he's a child, not able to be reasoned with.
What's the deal with today?
We all made mistakes.
So why not open up about yours?
For example, you kids were supposed to watch Jack Jack.
Yeah, we all make mistakes. Violet, you made a mistake recently. Let me point out your mistakes, children, and not mine. It's not very humble. You should point out your mistake first to get the conversation going on equal ground so they know that you're being sincere. At least with Bob, he was feeling guilty and didn't know how to react. Helen certainly comes off like a shady political figure, shifting scrutiny to others and avoiding talking about her own culpability unless as a collective we.
What's the deal with today?
We all made mistakes.
Maybe I'm reading too much into this dinner scene. On the other hand, what's the first thing Helen did on her way to her new job? She broke the speed limit. No emergency. Just broke the law because it felt good.
Oh, I'm such a hypocrite.
Having Helen be a flawed character is fine, but her lack of serious self-reflection, especially amidst self-admitted hypocrisy, is off-putting. Another example.
To help my family, I gotta leave it. To fix the law, I gotta break it.
No, you don't. You were just yelling at Baba for the same assumption.
If laws are unjust, there are laws to change them. Otherwise, it's chaos.
Does she organize a legal campaign to advocate for superheroes? No. She immediately assumes that she has to break the law to convince people, because the filmmakers know that that's more entertaining. But what they didn't consider is that this makes Helen look bad. Helen has no problem breaking the law for the greater good, or apparently whenever it feels good. But she belittles her husband in front of their kids for suggesting that such behavior could be acceptable. Then, rather than reinforce her new law-abiding stance and set a good example for her kids, she immediately starts breaking the law again. But now she's going full-on do as I say, not as I do mode, so Bob must lie to the kids about her new job.
What exactly is Mom's new job?
The important thing is we're out of the motel. She's an advocate for superheroes. It's a new job.
I like Mom's new job!
Sheesh! Helen now seems either flaky in her principles or obtuse in her honesty, or both, all because the movie wanted superheroes to still be illegal and Helen to argue with Bob about it at the dinner table. Minor damage is done to Helen's character consistency in order to undo a happy ending. This makes it twice as bad.
Mom is going out illegally to explain why she shouldn't be illegal.
Hey, the bus is here. Whoa, grab your stuff.
It didn't ruin the movie for me, and it didn't ruin Helen's character. She's still a good mother, a kick-ass hero, and
it's wonderful, but it's too generous.
Mostly humble about it.
I saved a runaway train! It was so great!
But this was not a good start. For me, all that was needed to reconcile this is a few lines from Helen at the table, explaining to the kids why she broke the law in the opening scene, yet still discouraging the kids from doing so moving forward. To be fair, Bob doesn't come off well in this conversation either.
Are we going to talk about it?
What?
The elephant in the room.
What elephant?
He is blindsided by Violet and Dash's questioning. It's as if he hadn't given much thought to how he'd explain to his kids why they were arrested.
What elephant?
And then he gets a temper at the first sign of disagreement from Helen. Despite what I said about Helen escalating the situation and threatening violence, which are both bad, it shouldn't be her job to calm Bob down in the first place. Both of them really come off flawed in this dinner table conversation. So then, why am I focusing my criticism on Helen and not Bob? Because Bob's faults in this dinner table scene are the foundation for his character growth. The film is going to force Bob to calm down and focus on his kids to succeed. The prime example of this is him helping Dash with his math homework.
Not the way you're supposed to do it, Dad.
Bob gets a temper.
I don't know that way. Why would they change math? Math is math.
okay,
Math
Dad.
is math.
Then another restless temper for failing Dash, and by extension, failing his wife Helen, who is the one to usually help Dash, and who expects Bob to take up that mantle while she's away.
I couldn't have done this if you hadn't taken over so well.
It's nothing.
I love you, honey.
Sweet dreams, honey.
He starts thinking about what his kid needs. Bob takes his frustration and channels it into proactive energy. He calms down, puts in the work, wakes Dash up early.
I think I understand your math assignment. So first you want to put all the numbers by themselves.
And succeeds at parenting. He overcame his temper and prepared himself for his son's questions about the math assignment. So, after the dinner scene, Bob's character grew.
You got it? Yeah, baby.
Helen, on the other hand, is treated with kid gloves by the filmmakers.
You will be great.
I will be great.
You'll be great.
I know I will. Those theme songs, or I'll turn this bus right around.
Well, it's like a superhero's playground. I know the chief of police.
No casualties!
Elastigirl, I'm glad to see you back.
Stretch a leg.
Bring lasting peace.
I will when you defeat evil.
Well, all the polls are going in your direction.
That's true. A protest?
They're here in support of you.
Thanks for coming out.
Gee golly, what a swell predicament I'm in. Unlike how Bob wrestles with his own temper, Helen's conscience doesn't wrestle with her hypocritical statements nor her conflicting values from the dinner table scene. Helen is back to her good old rebellious side from the Incredibles 1 prologue very abruptly, excited to relive the glory days. In the first film, Helen was the one telling Bob that family is more important than supering and reliving the glory days.
This is a very bad thing.
Reliving the glory days is better than acting like they didn't happen.
Yes, but this, our family, is what's happening now, Bob. And you are missing this.
She was emphatic about it. Thankfully, the filmmakers remembered this for one scene.
So, what do you say?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
They eased Helen's character into accepting a job away from home, emphasizing that it was a selfless act that would benefit her children in the long run.
I'm just not sure I can leave.
You've got to, so that we can be supers again, so our kids can have that choice.
I can't help but feel that this
Bye, sweetie.
is the peak of Helen's character development, deciding to go to work away from her family for the betterment of a cause.
To help my family, I gotta leave it. This is Elastigirl. I'm in.
That's a major priority shift for her. By comparison, the rest of the film is her learning to, what? Enjoy it?
Boom!
And that she made the right choice? Interesting. In The Incredibles 1, Bob enjoying his new superhero job is condensed into a fun montage. In Incredibles 2, it seems like Helen enjoying super work is half of the film. Where's her conflict? Not the physical conflict, there's plenty of that. Her internal character conflict. Why does there need to be character conflict? Well, in this case, because based on the previous movie, I know that a character conflict would naturally exist with her. Given how emphatic Helen was about not missing out on her family,
You are missing this.
you'd think she'd be struggling with being away from them in Incredibles 2. Nope! Helen only has the bare minimum of concern for the family that she left behind. One phone call.
You weren't gonna call me?
Jack.
I had an accident. I knew it. I'm coming home right now.
No accident. Stay there and finish your mission.
Then gloats about how awesome being a super is again.
It was so great!
Well, that's cool. She likes it after all. But then why not have her struggle with the fact that she's enjoying herself so much? After being so adamant about putting family first, she could feel guilty that she feels so good. And to have to resolve these conflicting feelings within herself, what does it mean that Helen's enjoying herself more than she thought she would? How does this inform her decision at the end of the movie to stay home or go back to work? What decision? The movie's not interested. Nope.
We got a ship to catch!
Helen was fundamentally opposed to leaving her family and to breaking the law, but once she starts doing both, there is little regret or pushback. Why am I watching her plotline for half of the movie?
How do you balance the superhero stuff with the life stuff?
I think Helen's storyline needed to be refined or reworked, or the film could be more focused on Bob trying to be a super stay-at-home dad. Super Mr. Mom.
Mr. Mom. Woo! Woo! Perfect!
Super Bob. Yeah. After all, Bob was the main character in the first film, and the story was much more focused for it. Bob's screen time reflected this. Within the first hour of The Incredibles 1, up until the point where Bob is captured, Bob had roughly 52 minutes of scenes. Helen had 18 minutes, and for 9.5 of those 18 minutes, Bob was in the scenes with Helen. Their screen times balanced out aggressively once Helen and the kids had to go rescue Bob, and then when they were all working together. But given how much time was dedicated to Bob's issues in the first half, The Incredibles 1 was mainly Bob's story. In Incredibles 2, the movie's attention is divided from the start between Bob and Helen equally. Within the first hour, Bob has had 32 minutes of scenes, and Helen has 41 minutes of scenes, much closer this time around, but with a 9-minute edge going to Helen. Yet, Bob's parenting adventures with Violet's boy issues, Dash's math homework, and Jack's powers going haywire are far more interesting to me than what Helen's up to. Just like his midlife suburban crisis was interesting in the first film. Despite being super, Bob is a relatable everyday dad.
I know you miss being a hero and your job is frustrating, and I just want you to know how much it means to me that you stay at it anyway.
In Incredibles 2, Helen is going through no similar crisis, warranting so much screen time.
What?
Let's look at the numbers again. In the first hour of Incredibles 2, Helen has 9 more minutes than Bob, but Helen has 14 minutes of action scenes, leaving 27 minutes for her character and story progression. 2 minutes less than Bob. Now, let's also take into account that Helen has her biggest character growth decision, leaving her family, within only 15 minutes of her screen time. And half of that 15 minutes of screen time is dedicated to establishing Bob's issues, the Devers, and the campaign. If you don't believe Helen grows as a character after deciding to leave home, Helen only has about 7 minutes of character growth in the first hour, with the rest of her 41 minutes being action, enjoying herself, or teasing the screenslaver without any personal conflict. And within that measly 7 minutes of character time, the filmmakers make her look like a hypocrite before abruptly resetting her and then putting her on easy street, experiencing constant success.
And it's not like I don't like strong girls. I'm pretty secure, manhood-wise.
The only thing Helen's conscience wrestles with in one scene is that Screenslaver hasn't been captured and that she can't enjoy the campaign's success because a criminal is on the loose.
Because I didn't get him. Screenslaver is still out there. All I did was play his game and win this round. Long as he gets to play, he wins.
This is another great idea. So, it too is immediately dropped.
Show her.
Look, Helen! New characters that think you are great! Stop thinking! I know that this was probably an intentional distraction, partially orchestrated by Evelyn herself, but it's just another character conflict for Helen that is immediately truncated.
Guys, I'm not so sure if this is, structurally speaking, such a good time for your, buddies to drop in.
What about Screenslaver? He's still out there on the loose. You're pretty tense about it. Well, a couple of drinks later in a Pixar movie, and she knows how to get him.
I know how to get him.
There you go, kids. Get drunk. You'll figure things out. So much for that conflict. But Evelyn's like, hey, what about sexism?
You were kind of in Mr. Incredible's shadow.
Mr. Incredible gets all the PR, but you are better than him.
Better than me?
If you alone had handled the Underminer, things would have been different. I'm just saying.
Nah, I beg to differ.
Helen rejects this idea for her character conflict, and I agree with her, but we're running out of ideas. I know what you're thinking. That's just the first hour. What about after those 41 minutes? 4 minutes of screen time later,
Screen's built into his glass.
Helen is captured. Evelyn tries to convince Helen that she's learning something, not to trust charming, rich benefactors that tell her she's great all the time.
That's why you failed.
What?
Why would you count on me? Because I built you a bike? We don't know each other.
But Helen rejects this opportunity for character growth too, and continues a working relationship with the villain's brother.
And I'm grateful for that.
We saw that he was innocent, but everybody else has to trust Evelyn's word on this.
Your brother is a child.
No lesson there either. He said he didn't do it, and he likes you.
I like you. Should we be worried?
Furthermore, Helen doesn't have any more thoughts or regrets about leaving her family after that one phone call at the beginning of the movie. In order to prop her up as a role model for young girls, the filmmakers minimized her defining character belief in family. And alternatively, nothing entertaining is done with the concept of a stay-at-home mom suddenly re-entering the workforce.
Oh, my back!
There's no comedy, no fish-out-of-water elements, besides this. But her inexperience on the bike has no payoff. Overall, Helen's just still got it. She's cool and hip. Very hip. Watching some behind-the-scenes videos, I learned that Helen's spunky, go-getter attitude was modeled after director Brad Bird's own wife.
Brad describes me as an inspiration for Helen.
A tribute that she loves.
Hey.
I don't want to belittle that aspect of Helen. I want to point out that Helen's mother-centric outlook from The Incredibles 1 was also a tribute to Mr. Bird's wife at that time.
She worked in film editing, and when we first had our kids, there was a decision about whether or not she should continue working because she made good money. And I said, look, as long as we can bring in enough money, it'd be great to have the kids have a mother around all the time. And we made it work.
The fact that the filmmakers want to update Helen to modern sensibilities.
One of us has got to get a job.
One of us?
Maybe it's my turn in the private sector.
Of her being a mother and provider is cool with me. But Mr. Bird's wife had 13 years between The Incredibles 1 and Incredibles 2 to grow into her current sensibilities. By comparison, Helen, her avatar, hasn't aged a day. Helen is starting exactly where she left off at the end of The Incredibles 1. And for Incredibles 2 to rush 13 years of progression into 7 minutes of screen time, and for Helen to not experience any withdrawal or whiplash regarding a fundamental, passionate belief, it's not just unrealistic, it's uninteresting. She's got nothing personal to work on in this movie. She gets a couple of action scenes to show off and is there to set up the villain. Don't get me wrong, her stretchy moves were a highlight of film number 1 and continue to be here, but the villain mystery is obvious.
Screenslaver is still out there. All I did was play his game and win this round.
Screenslaver's still out there, but little old me is stumped. This is embarrassing. Helen is smarter than this, yet never questions things early on. Who built that train that went haywire? Programmed its software? Were these vehicles actually hacked into? Were they all made by the same someone? She does nothing.
That means so much coming from you.
Helen doesn't ask any questions until it's too late. She really was caught up in her own hype and blindsided. After the train incident, immediately she's doing interviews about how fantastic she is.
No casualties!
After the helicopter incident, they immediately distract her by all the people that she's helping and then get her all drunk, and then they're throwing her into the next plane, and before you know it, boom, blindsided. But this blindsiding flattery isn't addressed as a flaw in Helen's character. So we've sacrificed Helen's intelligence
What happened?
What happened is you destroyed my evidence.
And layers to a mystery without even taking advantage of a character growth opportunity. I want meaning.
It may be crap, but hey, it's convenient.
Yeah.
Helen is making the same egocentric mistake that Bob made in The Incredibles 1. Incredibles 2 does not acknowledge this. Helen will not confess this to Bob. That sucks. It could have been a fantastic moment between the couple. Helen would finally understand what Bob was going through when Syndrome was flattering Bob.
You're welcome.
And how Bob got blindsided. There's more to say on Helen's treatment versus Bob's treatment later on in this review. Anyway, either give Helen some internal struggle with being away from her family, or adapting to modern sensibilities, or bump up the villain reveal to Act 2, and let the screenslaver control the minds of important characters sooner, or evil Helen or something. There are so many ways to make Helen's half of Incredibles 2 more interesting, and to give her places to go as a character.
It's not that simple, Bob.
As the film is now, it cuts to Helen when it needs action. And I gotta admit, the sequence of Mrs. Incredible chasing down a runaway train on her Elasticycle is fantastic and creative. The way she contorts and stretches to propel and balance the bike. Very well done and exciting. Great pacing and momentum. It's worth rewatching by itself, along with the Underminer scene at the beginning, showing off the Parr family working together as a super family. Though, the action peaked too early because of this. It doesn't get bigger or better than these two scenes. Not only that, but The Incredibles barely got to shine as a family of supers working together after the opening scene. There's just this quick, enclosed tussle on the yacht. That's disappointing after how much fun it was to see them working together in The Incredibles 1. There are a few brief fights and skirmishes too, with a highlight being a super-on-super match in the mansion, with the camera running all around and all the powers going off everywhere. It's pretty cool. But by the end of the movie, I realized something. Every major action scene in the film is a superhero attempting to stop a runaway vehicle. I'm not exaggerating. 4 set pieces do this. Underminer's drill, the train, the helicopters. Needless to say, when the climax turned out to be stopping another vehicle from hitting the city, I was fed up. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like, gee, the heroes managed to stop the vehicles the first 3 times, but maybe they'll fail the 4th time. In the climax of a kid's movie. Okay, I know, I'm being pretty reductive. There is variety in the types of vehicles, the lighting, and the dynamics of each scene. Plus, the helicopters do crash, but this is glossed over. Why isn't this a setback to the legalization campaign?
Let's not test the whole insurance will pay for everything idea on the first go-round, okay?
Like, look at that, look at that. Still, even with those concessions, I was bored by the time we got to the runaway yacht. Then, there must have been half a dozen
You have powers!
reactions.
Jack has powers?
Well, yeah.
What the?
Oh my God.
And I about lost it. The repetitiveness was an intentional gag. You can see with what Mr. Incredible says right here.
Jack has powers?
We know. Fight now, talk later.
But it was annoying to me personally because too much runtime was given to Jack already. The audience is spending the whole movie watching the characters experience the same surprise that they already experienced 13 and a half years ago. I get it though. If you care about all the characters, then you want to see each of their individual reactions to important revelations.
Where's On?
But I had stopped caring about Jack halfway through. The little dude got so full of himself. A prima donna. Spread the screen time love to the other kids. Violet socializing at school, or Dash having super ADHD or something. Jack's powers didn't even have to be a plot point in this movie. If they wanted to, they could have incorporated Jack's powers being discovered during the opening Underminer scene, freeing up the rest of the movie to time jump forward and tell a new story. But admittedly, you would have lost one of the funnest aspects of the current movie. What's that saying about killing your babies or killing your darlings? It might be literal with Jack.
Oh my God.
If we include scenes where Jack's just being held or is in the background making noises, Jack has 40 minutes of total scene time. Helen has 1 hour, Bob 57 minutes, Violet 31 minutes, and Dash 29 and a half minutes. Jack has the 3rd most screen time.
And he's not even toilet trained.
He only has 9 to 10 more minutes than Violet and Dash. They did a pretty good job of evenly distributing the running time between family members, but a lot of Violet and Dash's scenes are either interrupted for Jack.
Well, she won't understand it any better than I do.
more revolve around Jack Jack.
Why didn't you tell us?
I don't know.
They're your kids! Holy cow!
Yeah, Jack Jack.
That's really cool.
The movie pretty much halted for a Jack Jack short film in the middle of it. Now, I enjoyed it, but that speaks more poorly to the main story. It was still a digression. It's the equivalent of inserting the Jack Jack Attack babysitter short film into the running time of The Incredibles 1. I guess it's more understandable here because in my packed theater, the main thing that the kids were laughing at was Jack Jack. That's because Incredibles 2 is an adult film marketed towards kids. It is slow, with many scenes of characters sitting around, debating politics and marketing perception.
I ask you, which of us has the greater influence?
Which side of me are you asking? The believer, buyers. Doesn't matter what you're selling. It only matters what.
This is true. If I discovered the origin of the universe,
Media awareness is up 72%. The push for superhero legalization. We've got resources, lobbyists, worldwide connections, and, very important, insurance.
Insurance is key.
Evelyn did a cost-benefit analysis comparing all your last 5 years of crime fighting before going underground.
Look, it's not a good time to be away. Dash is having trouble with homework. Vi.
I heard the program shut down. How much longer are you in this motel?
2 weeks.
Thanks, Winston, Evelyn, and everyone at DevTech. I am forever in your debt.
Whoop-de-doo, kids.
It's actually a lot of fun, okay?
Yes. Cross-generational humor should be coming from superheroes doing everyday activities and sight gags.
How was Violet's date? That was tonight, right?
Oh, yes?
Yes, I can relate to Helen brushing her teeth in a motel, but it's kinda drab.
What you have to do to actually do scenes like when you're brushing your teeth?
I brushed my teeth.
In the booth.
I brushed my teeth.
The Incredibles 1 was having way more fun with the visual humor of domesticated superheroes. Sticking Bob in a tiny office cubicle or a car in traffic, having him accidentally damage property with his super strength, shaking a whole tree to get the cat out of it, super sibling rivalry.
Oh, hey, no force field!
Stretching for a lover's pinch. These are funny day-to-day superhero uses that appeal to kids and adults. Visually, The Incredibles 1 was also self-aware of the tropes in its genre.
I mean, one more jolt to this death ray, and I'm an epitaph.
He starts monologuing.
He starts monologuing. He starts like this prepared speech about how feeble I am compared to him.
While still embracing them.
And now I have a weapon that only I can defeat. And when I unleash it, I'll get... You got me monologuing.
Very little of this visual wit and genre satire
This message will self-destruct.
stands out in Incredibles 2 by comparison, unless it has to do with Jack Jack.
No firing the baby around the house, you understand?
Admittedly, he's funny. And the bandit gag between Jack Jack and the raccoon is clever. Otherwise, where's the loving superhero satire and the witty visual gags from the original Incredibles? They were having more fun as animators back then. Incredibles 2 is a straight-faced movie with Jack Jack dressing. The kids love the stuff. Just put it on there.
Are you gonna kill me?
Suddenly it's a kids movie.
In a way, this one is particularly more not a kids movie.
To be fair, making a kids movie wasn't Brad Bird's goal.
People who work in animation, we want to be taken seriously, we want to be, not seated at the kids' table. This is not positioned as the movie for the kiddies. People that don't have kids can go to this movie and be okay.
Yes!
Yes. Leave the kids away. You can be 20 and make it a date movie. It's actually fun.
We still allow kids into the screenings. It's okay. They have to bring lots of adults.
My kid really enjoyed it, and I go, "Did you like it?" And they go, "Oh yeah, sure, but Billy really liked it." And I'm like, I made it for you, and Billy can come, but I'm not a kid, and I made it something that I would want to see. Whether people mean to or not, they always come up to you and lead with, "My daughter or son loves your stuff," and I go, "What do you think about it?"
Now, if anyone makes fun of me for making a multi-hour long review for a kids movie, you let them know that Brad Bird wants to be taken this seriously.
Coach Klein said I could. Mr. Coach Klein said I could.
If anything, it deserves greater scrutiny because you're serving it to your children. After all,
Kids are stupid.
Ain't that right, Mr. Bird?
You know, not what I expected. They better grow up and be really edgy or I'm not in.
Furthermore, Incredibles 2 is tackling too many adult topics at once. You got media perception and manipulation of one's public image, adding body cameras to superheroes like they are cops, women in the workforce, stay-at-home fathers, a social media metaphor because people are addicted to screens in the 1960s, LGBTQ acceptance, political protests, vigilantism, and some implied bad language.
What the bite?
Pixar, man. I know it's Samuel L. Jackson, it's tempting, but show some restraint. By the way, this is not a call for censorship after the fact. I don't support that. I'm still mad I don't have a theatrical cut of Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. You guys remember? Shaggy snorting a hit from an empty whipped cream can? Nobody does anymore.
It's like it's been erased. Erased from existence.
Let's go. I don't really care about the bad language thing. It just seems out of character for Pixar. Like Brainstorming with liquor. But otherwise, Incredibles 2 doesn't have time to tackle all of these adult ideas, on top of all the plot lines for the Parr family members, so they come off as just modern-day topical pandering.
You have the stage to yourself now, and people have to pay attention.
Oh, you mean it's man's world and all that?
Look, we acknowledged it. Okay. The topic that I'm most disappointed with is the women in the workforce versus stay-at-home parents angle. Hear me out on this. The narrative that Evelyn is telling Helen about how she was always in Mr. Incredible's shadow.
You were kind of in Mr. Incredible's shadow.
Where is that coming from? All this second fiddle nonsense. If you ask me, Helen pushing back against this narrative should have been her character arc. Evelyn is playing to Helen's feminist side from the Incredibles 1 prologue. Remember her quote?
Girls, come on. Leave the saving of the world to the men? I don't think so.
Incredibles 2 even reminds us of it.
Girls, come on. Leave the saving of the world to the men? I don't think so.
Helen has always been a champion for female empowerment, and Evelyn is manipulating Helen's concern. Her concern that, by being a stay-at-home mother, Helen is missing out on an opportunity to positively influence a whole generation of young girls. This is a solid setup, but Incredibles 2 doesn't develop Helen to her natural conclusion that being a stay-at-home parent is heroic in and of itself.
What do you think is the core of this film?
The core of this film, I think that parenting is an act of heroism. The film's about parenting being an heroic act, but it's important to have good parents to raise good kids and make kids into heroes.
Oh, this line is in The Incredibles 2, but it's given to Edna Mode, voiced by director Brad Bird himself.
Done properly, parenting is a heroic act. Done properly.
It would have meant more coming from Helen, especially if her co-workers had been making passive-aggressive comments about jobless mothers. The perfect opportunity for this is the campaign party, when Helen and Evelyn have some downtime.
Must be nice for you, being out front after all this time.
Out front?
Specifically, I'm talking about this line.
I'm not saying you weren't big. No, you were and are a superstar.
Evelyn could have added this to the end of that sentence.
You were and are a superstar, but...
You know, you settled down. Let's face it, your talents were wasted on being a babysitter.
What?
All at once, Helen would grow angry and rebuke Evelyn's disrespect for Helen choosing to become a mother. Helen and Evelyn represent two different opposing paths and ideologies in life. Helen chose to not work a job, to be a traditional stay-at-home mother and family woman. Evelyn chose a more modern career, childless. They are each other's opposites, and they rub up against each other in this movie without any friction or acknowledgement of their fundamental differences.
That makes no sense.
Well, until we find out Evelyn is Screenslaver.
If it weren't for your core beliefs, I think we could have been good friends.
Go on.
At least I have core beliefs.
We have breaking news.
You didn't tell. At what point previously did you address these fundamental differences? You're not going to do it later. Let's get an argument going. The only fundamental difference these two had was inventors versus sellers.
I invent. He sells.
The best sellers have the most buyers.
This is true.
It would never have worked between us, darling.
There is a missed opportunity in Incredibles 2 for Helen to reassert her belief in motherhood when being challenged by a modern woman that doesn't respect it. Especially if Evelyn belittled Bob's manhood for having to be a stay-at-home parent while Helen is getting all the PR now. Let's see how he likes it. Heck, this side of Helen's character, being a champion for stay-at-home parents, was originally in The Incredibles 1. Yes, I'm not pulling this character idea out of nowhere here. If you own a DVD copy of The Incredibles 1, check out the alternate opening scene featuring the Parr family throwing a neighborhood barbecue. In it, Helen overhears one of the women guests gossiping disparagingly about stay-at-home mothers.
Throw away my prime years trailing after a bunch of snotty kids? No thank you. Hello, no thanks. Hello, I want to do something with my life. Wait a minute.
Helen stops the party to berate this woman for undermining the effort it takes to properly raise a child and maintain a household.
You consider raising a family nothing?
Director Brad Bird says it was one of his favorite moments, a tribute to his own wife, who was a stay-at-home mom at the time that The Incredibles 1 was being made.
We made it work, but one thing that she noticed was that when you were talking about work, everyone could connect with that. Once she said that she, was a mother, or that she worked in the house, their eyes glazed over and they kind of dismissed what she did.
Throw away my prime years trailing after a bunch of snotty kids?
Do you have any idea how much suffering would fail to take root if more people were just good parents?
Well,
What's more important than that?
I love the idea of a superhero defending, being a mom. Yeah.
He was sad to lose this idea.
I like that moment, and I'm sorry that we don't have something like that in the movie.
Incredibles 2 seems tailor-made to reuse this deleted Helen moment. But it doesn't go through with it. Helen has no big speech about parenting. It could have been in front of Bob and her fellow employees that were being disparaging about being a stay-at-home mother, or even said on camera to the whole city after the climax. It just doesn't happen. Why not have Helen more conflicted about leaving her family for work, conflicted by how much she enjoyed the work after all, conflicted over how other women like Evelyn viewed her choice to be a stay-at-home mother and raise a family as counterproductive to women, and then have Helen give a speech to bridge that divide, inspiring stay-at-home mothers and fathers that raising a family is super heroic in itself. There's a message. There's a reason for The Incredibles 2 to exist. This concept is reduced to a throwaway line by Edna Mode, mocking Bob.
Done properly, parenting is a heroic act. Done properly.
Sheesh. Meanwhile, the Bob and Helen role reversal story is desperately missing this closure at the end of the movie. I'm not saying that Mrs. Incredible should have quit to be a stay-at-home mom again. I just want her to acknowledge that she'd be proud to do either. Her and Bob are a super team, even if one of them is at home. A wholesome message for fathers and mothers. Maybe that's too balanced of a message these days. Did Bob and Helen learn anything? Anything? Anything they'd like to share with one another about the experience? It doesn't seem like it. There are a few lengthy scenes of Bob and Helen talking about their concerns in Act 1, yet there is not one conversation about what they've been through after the climax, man.
I missed Jack's first power!
No. There's just some Violet and Dash humor.
Well, I'm sorry she's rich and will probably get no more than a slap on the wrist. My sweet ride.
Cute. But what a missed opportunity. All right, Helen could have easily had a character arc. Instead, she changes abruptly and becomes a static character in the rest of the story. This means that Helen's half of the movie is more about the characters and events Helen affects, as opposed to Helen herself. These include her superhero co-workers, Screenslaver, and the Legalization campaign. Considering that half of the movie is taken up by Bob and the kids, how satisfying are these story arcs surrounding Helen? First up, the Misfit Superheroes. We never have a chance to get to know them. They are each only given a few lines to pitch themselves to the audience.
What I can do is this.
I am called Rick.
I assume your powers are...
zapping things.
Medical condition or superpower, you decide.
Yes, that is impressive. Keep practicing.
But that's about it. And they feel like tack-on flavor for Act 3 rather than characters in themselves. They exist for some unique power-on-power action and LGBTQ brownie points.
I've always considered you the gold standard for superheroes.
Well, thanks.
I love the social theme of how tough it is on a human when they have to hide who they are.
Not to be mean-spirited, but these people's inclusion doesn't feel sincere because they didn't bother to make them characters we care about. Have them fight alongside Mrs. Incredible for at least one mission before the climax. They are a whole other movie's worth of characters shoved into this movie. A bunch of forgotten, lovable misfits and the Creeper. Specifically, more could have been done with Voyd, a female superhero who grew up idolizing Helen's Elastigirl. Not enough time is spent with her to care about her proving herself to her childhood hero. It's a nice idea, but I don't feel it. This moment says it all.
Hey, hi, it's me again. How do you balance the superhero stuff with the life stuff? Like, I know that I can handle the superhero stuff.
She's totally zoning out on her.
Would you please excuse me for a moment?
Oh, yep. Okay, see you later. Good talk.
No time, bye. And this sucks because a lot of them seem like cool characters with lovable tics that animators spend a long time working on, but I don't know them.
Follow!
Oh, that whoever he is.
I am called Rick.
What an innocent.
I didn't pitch it as myself. I just pitched it as a giant red-headed woman.
Wait, he's a woman? Biologically?
The best kind of prize is a surprise.
Well, now I can see that he's wearing a skirt, but if I hadn't watched the behind-the-scenes clip 3 years later, I wouldn't have known. I thought Brick was a simple-minded strongman whose mama dresses him and combs his hair.
You will regret.
I really don't know these characters. I wish we had time for them so that whenever they're brainwashed, I'm worried and conflicted about it. They seemed nice in the meeting, but so did Evelyn. Before they are brainwashed, the superhero co-workers have less than 2 minutes and 40 seconds of screen time in an hour and 50-minute movie. That includes them standing in the background. They have 10 minutes of screen time total, which means 7 of those minutes are at the climax. Why don't we get to see the Misfits supering at the end, if I was supposed to care about them? They seem like a last-minute inclusion to me, but I can't confirm that. Also, their presence in the story begs a minor question. So, Bob's super strength is too destructive to be marketable, but this guy that crushes things? And an old dude that barfs lava? That's cool. Not to mention that creeper. Moving on. Screenslaver, the villain who controls people's minds, is played for mystery. It's obviously one of the Devers. They're the only 2 side characters that I didn't know before that have enough screen time to be satisfying. They try to throw you off with Winston a couple of times.
I want you to have this. A memento.
But when Evelyn was introduced, my brain heard her name as my sister, Evelyn. A villain. A villain Dever. Cutes. Pixar, you cheeky buggers. I didn't realize Evelyn's name was actually supposed to be a play on Evil Endeavor. Evelyn sounds like a villain. That seemed more obvious to me. She's also reserved and moody. Easy pickings. If the movie were stalling the villain reveal to develop Helen's character, then the obviousness of the reveal would be fine. But as I said, this doesn't happen. I also felt that the mind control concept is underdone. There could have been a big, emotional, heartbreaking fight between family members, playing out Bob and Helen's dinner table conflict on a massive scale or something. It's teased.
Helen, what are you?
Then abruptly halted. Incredibles 2 isn't nearly as emotionally courageous and exciting as The Incredibles 1.
I'm such an idiot.
Nothing as emotional or blood-pumping as the plane sequence or Syndrome baby kidnapping.
The baby's sleeping.
Listen to how Helen's vocal performance, the music, and the editing all combine for these goosebump-inducing moments.
Put a field around us now! I've never done one that big. Violet, do it now! Abort! 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 He's getting away, Bob! He has to do something now!
The way she exclaims,
Abort! Abort! There are children aboard, say again! There are children aboard this! No!
And
Bob, throw me!
are really upsetting and powerful in the best way. Nothing as threatening or raw happens in Incredibles 2. This moment at the beginning is the closest.
That should do it. What are you kids doing? Get out of here! This thing's gonna blow! There's no time!
The high-stakes setup was there with the mind control, but Evelyn doesn't achieve anything as a villain. I might be in the minority, but I think Evelyn's dependency logic was cool.
I'm using the technology to destroy people's trust in it. Like I'm using superheroes. Superheroes keep us weak.
An over-dependency on superheroes, just like an over-dependency on technology, makes people weak and complacent. That's true. She uses the screenslaver persona to show how vulnerable and easily manipulated we are when we place our hands in technology.
We no longer serve you. We serve only us. May the fittest survive.
Superheroes are part of your brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation.
Neat. But Incredibles 2 seems to take place in some sort of quasi-1960s time period with conflicting levels of technology. Futuristic trains of tomorrow. Tube TVs.
Please bear with us.
It's kind of an alternate version, alternate futuristic version of the 60s.
This technology angle seems to be solely aimed at us, the viewer, without any proper context in the movie. I guess a TV is on in the background in a lot of scenes.
We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical.
It doesn't seem to impede their day-to-day lives, So?
We break the rules and have technology that they didn't have at that time, but we're never going to have cell phones because then you wind up with a bunch of scenes of people doing this, and we have enough of that already.
But without cell phones, what in the movie is reinforcing Evelyn's argument? How are people over-dependent on technology in this universe? Just the TV? The fact that Mr. Bird doesn't like cell phones is all the more reason to include them. Make a humorous statement about them. Get families talking about it as they leave the theater. A meta message without context comes off hollow. I prefer Syndrome to Evelyn. Syndrome was about empowering the average citizen with technology so they wouldn't be so dependent on supers, leveling the playing field.
And when I'm old and I've had my fun, I'll sell my inventions so that everyone can be superheroes. Everyone can be super.
Evelyn wanted to prevent superhero dependency too, but she didn't have a plan to aid the average Joe on the streets. She just makes them afraid of superheroes and technology without much of an answer. Not a good politician. Villain. I also wish Evelyn had more examples of people's dependency on supers. All we get is her dad.
When our home was broken into, my mother wanted to hide. Begged my father to use the safe room, but father insisted they call his superhero friends. He died, pointlessly, stupidly, waiting for heroes to save the day.
Now, that's a very impactful one, but is it the only one? In fact, why is the villain the only voice of opposition to the superhero legalization movement? A couple of action scenes and one protest later, and the world leaders are gathering to legalize. Where are the people who outlawed supers in the first place? I'd be interested in hearing their case against supers. That property damage insurance argument from the beginning was pretty persuasive. Bring those guys back. Did they pursue restitution? Did shutting down Dicker's program satisfy them?
You'd have preferred we do nothing?
Without a doubt.
Why not present the counter-argument to these two?
The banks were insured. We have infrastructure in place to deal with these matters.
All right then, what's the big deal? If the insurance companies were going to cover this without the Incredibles' interference, but not after their interference, then it sounds like a corruption issue. Looking for an excuse not to pay up on a policy. The Incredibles could have caused the building collapse. We're not gonna pay. Really? Did they steal the money too? On the other hand, paying up enough money to cover all these damages would bankrupt or price hike into oblivion any one company. I would hope that every building in the city isn't insured by the same company. It is not that this type of corruption is unrealistic. My point is that it's another untapped avenue for the Incredibles to push back against their interrogators, considering their desperate efforts to stop the drill once it surfaced. Plenty of eyewitnesses would testify in the Incredibles' defense. Yet the insurance company can just claim, well, supers were involved. That's Dicker's program's territory, not ours. Shut it down.
The program's been shut down.
What?
To be fair now, the drill would not have surfaced and caused all that extra damage if it weren't for Bob's interference and destruction of the controls. True. Even so, what about the greater good? Underminer had openly declared war.
I hereby declare war on peace and happiness!
While the purpose of this attack might have just been to steal money from the banks, what proof do these politicians have that if the Incredibles hadn't interfered, that the Underminer would have just taken the money and gone home, and not continue wreaking havoc on the city with his humongous drill? Especially given the fact that he, declared war on peace and happiness.
We didn't start this fight.
Well, you didn't finish it either.
Did you stop the Underminer from inflicting more damage?
No.
Let us examine that claim for a moment.
The Incredibles forced the Underminer to abandon his giant weapon of destruction while saving citizens and preventing further collateral damage. The Underminer got away, and some bureaucrats are upset over insurance companies' corrupt technicalities in their fine print, but the Incredibles' actions took away the Underminer's greatest asset. They stalled a war and gave the authorities time to catch up to the Underminer whenever he attempts to use his stolen cash.
You'd have preferred we do nothing?
Without a doubt.
Come on, Bob and Helen, stick up for yourselves. Dicker, get up out of that corner.
You weren't much help.
You want out of the hole? First, you gotta put down the shovel.
That's probably another reason Bob was so upset, because he wasn't quick-witted enough to come up with this response at the time. They broke the law and caused some damage, but they presumably let you off with a slap on the wrist because, on some level, they knew what you did was right. Come on, let's get a heated debate going. Those can be fun. Winston Dever or the Ambassador never make an argument for superheroes. We never hear what they're saying to the public to convince them. We just hear that the arguments are going well off screen.
All the polls are going in your direction.
That's true.
Many say your speech today is critical.
The Ambassador made a big speech about superheroes today.
What about the fear-mongering from the first movie? The headlines from The Incredibles 1 mention people were afraid of supers.
People don't see the fight or what led up to it. They see what politicians tell them to see. They see destruction, and they see you.
What politicians? Who is Winston talking about? Are you accusing these politicians of manipulating the media? Does this justify Winston manipulating the media in retaliation? I don't know. I have no context for this comment in the movie. They just tell me something, but I didn't see it.
Neither did anyone else.
If Helen is not going to struggle with being away from the family, or enjoying herself, or modernizing herself, then at least have her struggle with an argument. She's the poster girl for the Devers campaign, but there's no hints of opposition to the campaign besides the extreme opposition Screenslaver. Where are the moderates? The filmmakers present us with the most biased, one-sided coverage of the legalization issue and expect me to care about its success? Okay, I get it. It's a kids' movie, but...
What are we teaching our kids?
I'll tell you what Pixar's teaching them. Break the laws you don't like. The media will support you, and police won't enforce the law if you have the right social image. A few protests and parties later, and things will go your way. No opposition. Those who would oppose you? Extremists. Villains. Important issues don't have moderate opposers with relevant points. You see what I mean about treating Helen's side of the story with kid gloves? There's little substance here. An oddly simplistic view of politics. I can be generous and say that perhaps it's meant to be encouraging to young viewers, to want them to get involved and not share the complexities, but instead the lack of opposition is boring, and that's why we need more action and Jack. Because Helen's not going through anything substantive, just surface level. However, If the filmmaker's solution to no opposition at all would have been to just add an obviously wrong fat cat politician to the mix, then the filmmakers probably made the right decision to nix all opposition. Nevertheless, there is a meaty middle ground here between no opposition and an evil caricature. Let's not pretend there wasn't. And if there are no legitimate arguments for outlawing supers in the first place, then what did lead to it? The first movie claims it was due to many lawsuits, overburdening government insurance programs.
Under tremendous public pressure and the crushing financial burden of an ever-mounting series of lawsuits.
Money. We can't keep doing this, Bob.
Too much taxpayer money going to clean up the messes of a privileged few. Will this be addressed? Are the body cameras going to help superheroes prove no fault in a lot of these cases? Is that enough to make things work financially?
Insurance. Insurance is key.
Or was the solution privatization?
Perfectly positioned to make some wrong things right.
Is DevTech advocating for corporate-funded superheroes?
Go out there and be your charming self and capitalize on it. Now you want to return my calls about superheroes, huh? Oh, I'll have to call you back.
Is Incredibles 2 a prequel to The Boys?
Is there something you want to get off your chest, Maureen?
When overturning an unjust law, it seems vital to address the cause of the unjust law. Was there a legitimate issue that needed a compromise? Or was there a corrupt system that put this unjust law into place? A system that now needs fixing? It seems like the latter. This ain't a social issue, because the average citizen is quickly getting on board with these superheroes again. There is no opposition. It all feels manufactured, which is either lazy storytelling or deeply concerning in universe.
Should we be worried?
How do you want to handle that on the earnings call?
Anyway, superhero legalization is comparable to coming out of the closet.
I felt like an outcast before, but now, with you being you, yay me.
They've all been in hiding, and names they've given themselves.
And fair treatment.
To make sure a few extraordinarily gifted members of the world's many countries are treated fairly.
I can easily see the fair treatment argument. After all, heroism isn't illegal for normies, as long as they aren't vigilantes. You can't go around beating people up like Batman. Neighborhood watches are fine. Assault is assault.
I'm counting on it.
So a regular citizen could still intervene to the best of their abilities without breaking other laws, but superheroes can't? It isn't fair treatment. That's a good point. I do wish that there were more examples of unfair treatment, such as a superhero saving the day without causing damage and still being prosecuted for it. Or a regular citizen could try to save the day and tragically fail, while a super looks on helplessly. More examples would help develop the fair treatment angle, but admittedly, the Underminer scene at the beginning does at least draw attention to the fair treatment concept. Now, the analogy about LGBTQ acceptance only halfway works for me due to the lack of story context. It's stated that superheroes need to overcome a negative public stigma.
So if we want to change people's perceptions about superheroes...
Yet, Incredibles 2 provides no examples of this negative public image after the opening scenes. It's dropped. Everyone loves Elastigirl immediately. Look at them driving around in the car. There's Elastigirl, woo! Unless you're a villain, of course.
Superheroes keep us
I'm never made to feel sympathetic by the filmmakers about the negative perception of supers. The Incredibles 1 did this better. The scene of Bob being chewed out by his boss while a man is violently mugged was far more effective at making me care.
That man out there.
He needs help.
Do not change the subject, Bob.
He is getting mugged.
Well, let's hope we don't cover him.
I'll be right back.
Stop right now, or you're fired!
Bureaucracy is holding back heroes from saving lives.
He got away.
And even punishing them for it.
Mr. Incredible's actions, so-called, causes him daily pain.
Hey, I saved your life!
You didn't save my life, you ruined my death!
Though not without their own financial reasoning.
It means hundreds of thousands of taxpayers' dollars.
I know.
Pay damages, erase memories, relocate your family. Every time it gets harder. We can't keep doing this, Bob.
It's a heated, complex issue. Powerful people are shown to be powerless from persecution. Incredibles 2 doesn't explore the debate or who it affects in any meaningful way or at all better than the first movie.
How do we do that?
Then it resolves it just as abruptly as The Incredibles 1 did, with this boat scene. I can imagine an alternate reality in which The Incredibles 2 realizes, okay, we peaked on the action early, and so the climax goes full Miracle on 34th Street, small scale, turning into a courtroom drama. Here are all the letters from the kids who believe in superheroes. Is that a good idea? It would depend on the execution, but in general, I would have liked to have had a voice to the opposition, more of a debate, and then finding a compromise or solution to everyone's issues with superheroes. It would have been more satisfying for me. The third act doesn't have to end in a courtroom battle like I was suggesting, obviously, but we've regressed the story.
Superheroes are illegal.
With no intention of developing the story better than the first film did.
Why can't I do the best that I can do? Right now, honey, the world just wants us to fit in.
So why have supers still be illegal? What would the story be like without this element? Honestly, if the filmmakers wanted to, it could be exactly the same. Superheroes could have been legal at the beginning of The Incredibles 2, but the public could have still had mixed feelings about it, many thinking that the legislation was done too hastily. That could be a meta-commentary on how fast the good ending from the first movie materialized in just a few months. Furthermore, if you remember, Syndrome killed most of the big-name supers. That terrifying fact, combined with a mixed public perception, would have scared the lesser-known superheroes, such as Voyd's crew, from coming out of hiding. At the beginning of the movie, the Parr family and Frozone would have been the first supers to show themselves in public since the legalization, but the damage from the Underminer incident would have shifted the public against supers again. An opposition campaign would have been launched to overturn the rushed superhero legalization. Helen could then have led a legal campaign to convince citizens that they made the right decision, that superhero legalization was the right thing after all. Meanwhile, the kids, given the heated debate, could have been struggling with their super personas versus their secret identities.
Tony! Like, oh, superheroes. Kids love superheroes.
Yeah.
I hate superheroes, and I renounce them!
And Bob, despite being legally able to fight crime, would eventually agree to let the Devers and Helen improve the super's public image while he takes care of the kids. See, same basic plot of the current movie, but now there's no illegal activity or hypocritical actions from Helen, and we're using the pre-existing status quo from The Incredibles 1 to set up similar stakes in a convincing manner. Instead of retconning The Incredibles 1, it challenges its conclusion, which is good progression. Plus, if superheroes are legal, now Evelyn has nothing to lose with her all-or-nothing villain plan. In the current movie, Evelyn's plan sucks. If she has a vendetta against superheroes, this plan is awful. Everything hinges on the climax. Building supers up to break them down at the last minute. No contingency plans. As screenslaver, Evelyn accelerates the return of superheroes by improving public perception faster than Winston's campaign could have done alone, just waiting on the street to stop small-scale crimes.
Fresh on the heels of her own heroic save of a runaway train.
The ambassador made a big speech about superheroes today. Turns out saving someone's life makes a good impression on them. Who knew?
Her theatrics were the sole reason supers were legalized again. You bonehead. Speaking of which, Evelyn's talents and whole career are centered around technology.
With Evelyn as designer and myself as operator, we threw ourselves into building dev tech into
a world-class telecommunications company.
Bigger than ever.
Yet, she wants to make citizens afraid of it through her screenslaver persona. Once again, my argument isn't that this is a plot hole. It isn't. My argument is that this seems to imply an undiscovered bit to Evelyn's backstory. Evelyn's plan is bigger than just getting revenge on superheroes. It seems like Evelyn also wants to get revenge on her own life's passion, technology.
Hey, I'm using the technology to destroy people's trust in it.
If Evelyn's whole career revolves around technology and she's willing to sabotage it, clearly Evelyn must resent her own career choices. What's the deal with that? What aren't we being told by the filmmakers? What were the negative consequences of Evelyn's decision to have an innovative career versus becoming a traditional, for the time period, housewife like Helen? Did her untraditional ambitions cause a rift between Evelyn and her parents?
I never know what people want.
Such a rift would continue to torment Evelyn years later, as she realizes she's never going to get that lost time back with her family. There's her brother Winston, but she resents him too. Why?
I invent He sells.
Your brother
is a child.
She calls him childish for associating a link between supers being legal and their parents being alive.
Like a child, Winston conflates the two. Mommy and Daddy went away because supers went away.
But Evelyn's statements are hypocritical. She is also associating her parents' death with superheroes, just in the opposite way of Winston.
Our sweet parents were fools to put their lives in anybody else's hands. Superheroes keep us weak.
My parents are gone because of supers. Supers make us weak. No, your daddy was stupid. Evelyn's main complaint is commercialization.
If I discovered the origin of the universe, my brother would find a way to market it as a foot massager. People will trade quality for ease every time. It may be crap, but hey, it's convenient.
Yeah.
Her talents are being wasted to make cheap crap, causing the citizens to be technologically dependent. Well, the movie never shows an example of this cheap crap, nor how people are dependent on it. So I'm not sure why, specifically, Evelyn's so upset. I don't feel it. That's why you needed cell phones in your movie. It's not just to make the social media metaphor make sense, but also because technological dependency is crucial to understanding why Evelyn resents her job and her own life's passion, technology.
People will trade quality for ease every time.
Show me this on screen so I sympathize with her. Also, the head operator of DevTech is her brother, Winston. She can't talk to her own brother about being unfulfilled and wanting to change things up. Why not have a scene where he sympathizes with her, but he's too committed to his company's shareholders? His hands are tied. That would be something, and it would explain why she's mad at the situation more than she is at her brother and brings him along at the end on the plane. And again, the way that Winston makes it sound, Evelyn's practically co-running the company.
Nobody expected us to be able to actually run Dad's company.
That means Evelyn is rich.
I ask you, which of us has the greater influence?
What is stopping her from investing her own money into her own research and development or side business? Nothing! Now, maybe Evelyn, as lead designer, was exclusively contracted to DevTech. DevTech owns all of her future inventions. Maybe DevTech is underpaying Evelyn.
No!
If Evelyn tried to strike out on her own, she'd be sued into oblivion because of this contract. Maybe that's why Evelyn needs to sabotage DevTech's reputation if she ever wants any creative freedom ever again. That would be a logical motive. But there's nothing in the movie supporting all of those maybes.
What are you getting away from?
Company stuff.
Evelyn's attack on technology is way too generalized, and she makes no attempt to frame or implicate DevTech as part of the Screenslaver scam. Nor does Evelyn allude to any personal beef with DevTech at all. As things are now, it seems like nothing is holding Evelyn back from starting her own side company and feeling more fulfilled. But no! Instead, she invests into villainy and self-ruin.
That makes no sense. If he's smart enough to conceive of technology like this, he's smart enough to think of something to do with it.
Why can't Evelyn invest in herself? Without obstacles to Evelyn being the woman she wants to be, Evelyn's complaint about commercialization seems to be surface level, a facade for Evelyn's real issues. Issues the movie never reveals. I can guess that it has something to do with public approval. I assume that Evelyn is projecting whenever she says this.
Must be nice for you, being out front after all this time.
Out front?
You have the stage to yourself now, and people have to pay attention.
Personal conversations usually begin with a relatable icebreaker. How's the weather? And stuff like that. I find it very telling that Evelyn thinks being out front and people having to pay attention to her is a relatable icebreaker. It gives me the impression that Evelyn thinks she's undervalued and should be out front more, and people should have to pay attention to her more. What is standing between her and the recognition that she deserves? Evelyn seems to be an antisocial type. Winston was probably respecting her privacy.
Thanks, Winston, Evelyn, and everyone at DevTech.
Is he just supposed to read her mind? Again, Winston is her brother. She can't approach him with her concerns. Why?
We're not going into it right now.
To be fair to Winston, Evelyn is not a good look for DevTech. She's unprofessional, boozing it up.
Are superheroes allowed to drink on duty?
Tardy and hungover.
My tardy sister, Evelyn.
And mistreats the help. Disheveled. And just dripping that spaced out devil-may-care attitude all over the place. She claims she doesn't know what people want.
I never know what people want.
But really, she doesn't want to be what people want. Okay, this is getting a bit more confusing. So Evelyn has all the public approval she could want, but resents it because it isn't on her terms. Evelyn has the resources to strike out on her own. She doesn't. So this is less about gaining approval and more about a fear of losing that approval. Evelyn does not trust that if the public saw her true potential, they would still support her. Why? Well, the movie doesn't give us a reason. But if we plug in that father-daughter backstory that I speculated about earlier, it would go something like this. There's a rift between Evelyn and her father over Evelyn's untraditional career path instead of being a housewife. He dies. No reconciliation.
He died. Pointlessly. Stupidly.
Evelyn is scarred about never having received her father's approval.
I never know what people want.
What do you think they want?
She supplants her father's approval with the public's approval and begins to resent that the public's approval requires her to make traditional products, just like her father's approval required her to be a traditional woman.
They're out in public again. This is our chance.
Now, the same public that outlawed superheroes when her dad needed them most wants superheroes back. Evelyn snaps.
Our sweet parents were fools to put their lives in anybody else's hands.
Her father's death was in vain. Why is Evelyn trying to make the lives of the public more convenient? The same public whose traditional values caused a rift between her and her father. They're all fools. Why is she supporting her dad's company, making life better for the people that hurt her father, who then hurt her? Burn it all. This could be a powerful and relevant backstory. The angle of the traditional housewife versus a career woman could tie back into Helen's story.
If it weren't for your core beliefs, I think we could have been good friends.
After all, if we had had the scene I suggested earlier, where Evelyn made those nasty comments to Helen about Helen's talents being wasted on being a babysitter, while harsh, there would have been a grain of truth to it.
What?
Helen was so invested in her family to the extent that she was willing to accept an immoral law.
Whether it's fair or not, that's the law.
And sacrifice her natural talent and vigor for superheroing. Likewise, Evelyn was so invested in her work.
Thanks. Designed them myself.
To the extent that she was willing to sacrifice her own familial fulfillment, blame superheroes for her lack of familial fulfillment, and turn villainous. If Helen hadn't taken on the Devers campaign and rediscovered this side of herself, would she have eventually grown resentful towards her own family for being unfulfilled as a superhero?
Settle down, are you kidding?
It's a juicy question that isn't posed by the movie. I think that the best villains are the ones that embrace an extreme version of irrelevant points. Even though they go too far, the villain serves to illuminate a potential flaw in the hero's perspective.
That's why you failed.
What?
Perhaps the moral of the story should be about finding a proper work-life balance. Of course, if a woman's life passion is her family, I do not think she should be ridiculed by other women. It would have been interesting to hear Helen's stance on this. And the cherry on top is that Evelyn's father issues could have made Helen more appreciative of Bob.
You're adorable.
A father who wants to nurture Violet and Dash's untraditional talents, despite society and his own wife.
I will not be made the enemy here. You know why we can't do that.
Telling them to self-suppress.
What are we teaching our kids?
To respect the law.
Even when the law is disrespectful?
There are complex yet great ideas to explore here that just were not touched. And watching some behind-the-scenes clips, I think I know why.
We put together the arc for Bob and the kids more quickly, sooner than we did the villain plot.
Just like the first movie in a really strange way, they came later in the process. Winston Dever wasn't in the first iteration of the story. It was about AI in some way.
And the machine started kicking into gear, and about 5 months into it, I realized that plot doesn't work, and now I'm screwed because I have a release date. So this other part of the story, how's that? And I'm going, it's gonna be fine. So the villain plot kept changing. The superhero's villain part I had to play around with endlessly, and was like the homework assignment that wouldn't end for me. The villain kind of, for some reason, I don't know why, but kind of comes last.
Maybe there wasn't enough time to incorporate these technology ideas and flesh out Evelyn's motive. I can't blame them for it. To have to rework the half of the movie that is working in order to fix the part of the movie that isn't working as well is very risky.
Yeah, something's not sitting right.
And I'm sure this applies to all those adult topics that I felt were underexplored as well. I thought it was pandering, but maybe they just didn't have enough production time. As a consequence, like I said, the villain's surface level dependency logic is cool. Comparing technological dependency to superhero dependency.
I'm using the technology to destroy people's trust in it, like I'm using superheroes.
Yet her motive is shallow, baseless, and self-contradictory. Self-contradictory in that Evelyn, gotta keep it pure Dever,
Gotta get a way to keep it pure. I know I do.
wants superheroes to suppress their full potential and blend in with society.
You're gonna help me make supers illegal forever.
While complaining about having to suppress her full potential to succeed in society.
People will trade quality for ease every time.
Ironic. Is she jealous that society is embracing superheroes for who they are, but she doesn't think they're gonna embrace her? But if I'm not supposed to be drawing these conclusions, then maybe Winston should have been Screenslaver.
I love superheroes!
If Screenslaver were Winston and he was intentionally causing chaos to benefit superheroes in the long run, that would make more sense. Plus, it would create a moral gray area. It's a victory for superheroes, but based on a lie.
I want you to have this. A memento.
Thanks, Winston.
That's pretty interesting to me. If Winston is a villain just to prop up superheroes, then that would mean that the heroes succeeding means that the villain succeeds. Instead, it's Evelyn, and she's incompetent, accomplishes the opposite of her goal, and poses no real threat. This is punctuated by the fact that 2 children and a baby comically foil her plan.
A baby?
Jack, no!
A super baby?
No.
Incredibles 2 shifts its perspective away from Helen and Bob, the main characters, to their kids for the first half of Act 3. It's a cool concept, but the movie wasn't building up these characters to take over. I mean, it was building up Jack, and they developed a control of his powers, and then they pay it off in the climax. He has a good progression, even though he's not a character. It's more about the progression of people learning how to control him. There were 2 opening scenes of setup. The kids interfered in Underminer's attack, then were scolded for it, but wanted to prove themselves.
We are old enough to help out.
Yeah, we want to fight bad guys.
Both of these scenes were within the first 13 minutes. 68 minutes later, the kids are forced into action. For those 68 minutes in between, the kids wanting to get involved and prove themselves hasn't been reinforced at all. The kids kind of just let their passion go.
I hate superheroes, and I renounce them!
I thought you renounced superheroes.
Yeah, well, I renounce my renunciation.
Consequently, I'm not invested in it anymore because they aren't. So when the kids have to step up to the plate, I think, oh, that's neat. I guess you did set that up 68 minutes ago. When I could have been elated for them had the movie shown the kids pining and prepping for this opportunity throughout the movie. This is a payoff with a setup, but lacking a fulfilling buildup, which again is equally important.
We didn't plan this well.
What do you mean? We're here, aren't we?
This would have been better payoff as a third act for a different Incredibles movie. An Incredibles movie based around the kids growing up and questioning if they are ready to be superheroes. How do they go back to being normal kids after the island? What is it like hiding their powers from their best friends and schoolmates? Do they have best friends? Do they even want to be supers or regular people?
No, you don't.
Then, when Incredibles 2 places them in the driver's seat in Act 3, the kids taking action itself is a payoff, embracing their super side. Instead, the kids' screen time in Incredibles 2 is mostly about developing Bob. Out of the 3 kids, Violet has the best character arc, revolving around trust. She starts off upset that she has to babysit during the Underminer chase.
One of you patrol the perimeter, keep the crowds back and safe. The other watch after Jack.
But I thought we were gonna go.
You heard your mother.
She's a young superwoman who's confident that she can help her mom and dad save the day. Babysitting is something she's stuck with.
You're not sticking me with babysitting! Violet! Who's watching Jack? Ash is watching him!
Violet, here, you take him.
babysitting. Well, you guys did the important stuff.
She incorrectly views it as a sign of distrust from her parents. This perception is reinforced when her parents actually show signs of distrust towards her, refusing to tell her why they are sneaking off to the Devers Tower, even though she can see they're in costume. Moreover, Helen shuts down the discussion produced by Violet's curiosity at the dinner table.
You're not old enough to decide about these things.
Bob doesn't tell her about erasing Tony's memory.
You had me erased from Tony's mind!
Or that Jack has powers.
You knew about this?
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell us?
I don't know.
We're your kids! We need to know these things!
As if she can't handle it or help, that she's still a child and not a teenage young woman. All of this dishonesty and going behind her back causes her to snap. But then in a moment, Bob finally breaks down and is honest with her about what he's going through, treating Violet as a young adult, an equal.
I'm sorry. I'm used to knowing what the right thing to do is, but now I'm not sure. I just want to be a good dad.
That is a breakthrough, man. That's how you do character stuff, man. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Then Bob falls asleep instantly as a joke. Yet still, Bob opening up to Violet makes her realize how hard it is to take care of kids, that Bob and Helen's obfuscation was meant for their protection, and that it is actually a huge honor and responsibility to be asked to take care of Jack. When the time comes, Helen is proud of her for stepping up this time, and Violet finally realizes that taking care of Jack is an important responsibility, which she now takes on willingly.
My shields are probably better protection than the ship. I should stay here with Jack.
That's my girl.
I had a lot of disparaging things to say about this movie, but there is a lot of good stuff in it. Though she backtracks on this a bit by making Dash babysit Jack.
Wait, who's gonna watch Jack? Suck it up. I won't be long.
And Violet did not drop Jack off somewhere safe before going to fight grown superheroes. In fact, she was elated at the idea of weaponizing her baby brother.
Incredible! Take us to DevTech.
But now that the boat's about to crash, Violet's going to virtue signal to Daddy about protecting Jack, who wouldn't even be on this boat if Violet hadn't brought him here. I'm getting mixed messages. And despite learning to be more open with Violet, Bob runs out just like he did at the beginning of the movie at the motel without telling Violet that her mother is in danger.
Why are you in your super suit?
Completely contradictory to what he just learned. Just such casual character growth inconsistencies. Not that that's unrealistic to how people actually act, it's just that it's not very satisfying in the context of a story. Now that I think about it, Violet's subplot is still mostly about Bob learning to open up to her. Violet's not that active of a character in her own arc. Also, even Violet can't avoid going through some pseudo-regression in this movie.
Tony Rydinger?
The boy's memory is erased. Violet doesn't know, and she briefly loses all of her confidence she built up in The Incredibles 1. Where are her friends from the track meet to console her? Look at this chick. Who's this chick? Isn't she in the second movie? Let me look at the shot again. I'll have to look at the shot again. I'll tell you later. Who knows? She's utterly alone again for a big chunk of the movie. That best friend could have gone a long way in externalizing her personal thoughts about her situation, not to mention their own thoughts. What do these teenagers think about this whole legalization campaign? Superheroes were before their time, and that incident with the Underminer at the beginning would be the first thing that the kids actually experienced with real superheroes in their lifetime. That could have been interesting for Tony to bring up with Violet. If the movie hadn't erased Tony's memories, then Tony's subplot could have been about Tony and Violet starting to date, actually moving her story forward. Maybe Mr. Incredible would not trust a boy being alone with Violet, following her comically and using his superpowers while he's doing it, and it all compounds the mistrust that Violet feels from her parents. The family dropping off Tony and Violet at the movies at the end would mean something more because her parents would both finally be trusting her to go on a date as a young woman. And once again, I'm not pulling this out of nowhere. The current ending of Incredibles 2 already sets up what I'm suggesting. Helen and Bob are prying into Violet's dating life.
We'll be sitting on the other side of the theater, not watching you.
He's kidding.
So you guys are close, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
We can get closer.
So even though my suggestion is a cliche at this point, it seems to be the direction the filmmakers are hinting at anyway for Incredibles 3. So why not do it in Incredibles 2 and save us all the time? Plus, Amnesia, by any other name, is equally as tropey, so we're at a stalemate here in terms of suggestions versus reality.
So good.
In the non-spoiler section, I mentioned that certain storylines develop off-screen abruptly. One of them I already spoke about, the superhero legalization movement, with all the debate happening off-screen. Another big one is a scene missing between Bob and Violet after Violet was embarrassed at the restaurant. Bob was shaping up, getting better at this parenting gig, then abruptly, after the diner scene, he's a total wreck. No explanation. I can assume that Violet chewed him out, but why was that cut out of the movie? It seems important.
Bob is such a good dad. Why does he struggle at first?
Why does any dad struggle at first? Why did I go through all the pain? You know, the first time I solved a problem and it worked and the kid went to bed happy, I thought, I'm a fine dad now and I'm done, right? And it's like, no, the next morning you have to be a fine dad again. And again and again and again. It's actually really hard.
The problems change every day.
Yeah.
Every day. Just when you think you got it, it changes.
I appreciate this idea, and I think this concept was portrayed well earlier in the movie. But it doesn't excuse Bob's abrupt mental breakdown. In fact, it actually makes it worse because Mr. Incredible was consistently bouncing back and adapting to all the previous challenges. Jack pooped himself. Bob handled Jack off screen. Bob didn't understand the math assignment, worked through it, helped Dash, and Bob was back on top the next morning, even cooked a big breakfast with a smile on his face. Then Bob says the wrong thing. Violet got furious. So Bob planned a family outing to help Violet. Violet was embarrassed, stormed off mad. We cut away for an action scene, cut back. Bob is now on the edge of his sanity. Incredibles 2 had established a character pattern. Bob is resilient. There was no buildup of Bob slowly losing his composure behind the scenes, quite the opposite. After the first rough night with Jack and Dash, Bob was shown to be slowly gaining confidence, composure, and control. Suddenly, we cut back after the diner scene and he hasn't slept in days when he was looking well rested the last time we saw him. It's an incredibly jarring regression within the regressions. Can I just add? Man, Bob gets dumped on in this movie.
Oh my God, you're worse than I thought.
The dude just abruptly starts losing his mind. He's seemingly gaining control, then nope. Unshaven, hasn't slept, pulling out his hair, scaring the kids.
I eat thunder and crap lightning, okay? Because I'm Mr. Incredible.
This felt like a radical departure from the logical flow of events. I know what I'm supposed to think. The real important character bit is when Bob's old Incredible mobile is being sold at auction.
That's my car!
That is his breaking point. A final blow to his ego, exacerbated by an irrelevant night of no sleep. This still doesn't work for me, as after the first night, Bob had been working to keep his ego in check. For this kind of an outburst to happen, I feel like something must have been bubbling under Bob's surface. There should have been an argument scene with Violet after the restaurant.
Hey, Vi, say hi to...
Don't push it, Dad.
Followed by maybe a time-lapse montage, seeing Bob increasingly struggle with the kids after that restaurant incident over multiple sleepless nights, while also seeing more and more news stories praising Helen, who's doing the job Bob wants the most. Then, boom, in the montage on Bob as an exhausted wreck. The Incredibles 1 had a similar montage to get Bob into shape and to build him up. This could work as a nice counterbalance to that. Just a little bit more connective tissue. And even with such a buildup, it's hard for me to believe that he would have this big of an outburst in front of his children.
How do I do it?
Especially when he seemed so ashamed after his one brief outburst in front of Helen at the end of the first movie. Obviously, we can all guess what happened to Bob, but guessing an essential turning point for Bob's character is incredibly unsatisfying. And without context for whatever Bob went through, he now seems irrational and unjustified.
Because I'm Mr. Incredible!
It's an over-the-top display of incompetence on his part. And you juxtapose this with Helen's overcompetence, and I felt like the movie was being mean-spirited towards Bob in general. Granted, Jack is a tough case, but it's not like Bob hasn't had to look after his kids before. There are glimpses of him taking care of them in the Incredibles 1 montage. Look at this. And like I said, by comparison, Helen is treated with kid gloves, despite all the chaos going on around her and conflict that she should be feeling as the sole representative for all superheroes while trying to solve a mystery, yet her mind is cool and collected the whole way through. Meanwhile, Bob is thrown through the ringer. You stack next to that a couple jokes about men in general.
So simple, even he can do it.
And this horrible cowardice. Again, maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe it's just meant to be funny simply because the man isn't acting like a man. It's a role reversal. I used to laugh at those all the time as a kid. When viewed within the context of the rest of the movie, I gotta admit, it got under my skin a bit. Look at this.
My husband used to listen to a police scanner, waiting for something to happen, and I got mad at him for it.
Yeah, it's funny. Screw Bob.
If you alone had handled the Underminer, things would have been different.
Dang. Don't nod your head to that. I get it. Bob broke the controls and posed like a jackass.
We meet again! Oh, great!
But without Bob entirely, since Underminer had an escape pod, it's possible he still would have sabotaged his own controls.
Bob! Help me with the boiler!
And Helen alone wouldn't be able to stop it from wrecking the city. Bob made prideful mistakes, but to disrespect him, implying he was totally useless, the movie itself never reconciles with Bob after tearing him down. Moreover, it insults the core of his character. I mean, watch this.
Elastigirl is our best play.
Better than me?
Frick.
She, really, a credit to her, but, you know. You know.
Are you gaslighting me, Pixar? Why would Bob almost say that? Sure, they left it intentionally ambiguous, as if to put the onus on the viewer. What did you think he was gonna say? All right, you asked for it. I'll tell you the absolute worst thing I think he could have said, followed by the best. The worst thing Bob could have said, based on the late 1950s, early 1960s time period, these comments.
Must be nice for you, being out front after all this time.
You mean it's man's world and all that?
His opening statement.
I mean, she's good. She, really, a credit to her.
And how pissed Helen looks after he almost says it. I get the feeling that Bob was about to say, you know, she's a woman. Why in the hell would Bob almost say that? That assumption has to be wrong. Bob respects and loves Helen because she's his equal, constantly challenging him to be better, and vice versa.
Whatever happened to ladies first?
Well, whatever happened to equal treatment?
Hey, look, wait. The lady got me first.
Oh! Bob has looked at Helen for guidance, for her wisdom, for her insight as a mother and also as a competitor, really.
That's cool.
And he finds a lot of strength in himself through her.
That's cool.
Well, no, I think it's true.
Was he so desperate for superhero work that, even though he isn't a sexist, he decided to try to appeal to Winston's sexism? After all, Winston's a businessman in the late 1950s. Of course, said businessman's sister/business partner is in the room, clearly indicating that Winston isn't your average 1950s businessman. Bob isn't an idiot. Mr. Incredible was very quick-witted and adaptable in the first movie, catching on to situations before they were explained to him.
Unfortunately...
Let me guess. It got smart enough to wonder why it had to take orders.
We lost control.
Outsmarting and maneuvering artificial intelligence. But now he's socially oblivious and maybe a semi-sexist? If Pixar wants to make a point about how this time period was rife with sexism, thus reinforcing the importance of Helen being the head of the superheroes legalization campaign, that's cool. The problem is, Pixar didn't properly do that. Besides this one dialogue exchange between Helen and Evelyn...
You mean it's man's world and all that?
The only actual example of sexism is this. And for all I know, the mayor's superiority complex is completely gender neutral. He may treat everyone below him like this. I don't have context. So the only real piece of sexism in the movie is what Bob, the main character of the first movie, almost said, despite it being totally out of character. Okay, I do not want to be unreasonable. Let's rewind things a bit. What is the best thing that Bob might have almost said. Well, Bob could have meant...
I mean, she's good. She's really a credit to her.
To her profession, but...
You know,
I'm Mr. Incredible. I'm the most popular, recognizable, and beloved superhero.
Mr. Incredible,
catching the bad guys, pow, pow, pow!
Okay then, he wasn't appealing to sexism, but rather, he would be using logic about his own marketability to persuade Winston, who is a marketeer. That would be a fair point. That's more intelligent on Bob's part. Everybody calm down. Bob isn't an idiot. If that's the case, I still don't like the idea of ultimately portraying Bob as a crazy egomaniac.
Better than me?
I eat thunder and crap lightning, okay? Because I'm Mr. Incredible.
I can do it better.
Not Mr. So-so or Mr. Mediocre guy.
You know.
Mr. Incredible.
This is awful stuff. The Incredibles 1 was already about Bob wrestling with his ego. But ego, despite its negative connotations, is merely a measure of one's self-worth. The Incredibles 1 contextualized Bob's ego. Bob was undervalued by his job and society. He struggled with his ego because his self-worth was in the toilet, and he didn't want his kids to grow up with the same low self-worth.
Want to do something for Dash? Then let him actually compete. Let him go out for sport.
You know why we can't do that.
Because it'd be great!
This is not about you!
And the climax of the first movie had Bob clarify that it wasn't about his ego anymore. It's about protecting his family.
I'm sorry, this is my fault. I've been a lousy father. So obsessed with being undervalued that I undervalued all of you.
Dad? Shh, don't interrupt. What is this to you, playtime?
No.
So you can be Mr. Incredible again?
No!
Then what? What?
I'm not strong enough.
Strong enough?
No.
That's what this is? Some sort of workout?
I can't lose you again!
Not again. I'm not strong enough.
That self-humbling moment is my context for Incredibles 2. Within that context, I was confused about what Bob was going to say here to Winston.
You know.
Either he was going to say something sexist or he was going to say something ego-oriented. Both conclusions are hinted at by the rest of the movie, and both conclusions undermine his character from The Incredibles 1. The ego-oriented one is more acceptable. It is not unreasonable to ask Bob to put his money where his mouth is. If he's really overcome his ego, and this is all about his kids, then Bob should be able to set aside the limelight for his family. But the movie takes it too far, eventually insulting Bob's character as borderline incompetent. Plus, the fact that Bob was too ashamed to finish the line makes me think that he was about to say the worst sexist line. Are you trying to get me to pick my own poison, Pixar? Hey, is Bob a sexist, a prima donna, or both?
I mean, she's good. She's really a credit to her.
She's a credit to her sex, but
you know.
I'm Mr. Incredible. Why would you leave this line ambiguous? For plausible deniability? Moreover, while attempting to be a movie about overcoming public stereotypes of superheroes and maybe women and LGBTQ, Incredibles 2 is simultaneously exploiting male stereotypes for laughs.
So simple, even he can do it.
Men can't cook, can't take care of kids, pretend to be tough, but they're cowards, prone to childish outbursts. I might be proving that.
I am ready to, throw it all over and come home to, to save the family from Bob.
Again, I ask, are you gaslighting me, Pixar? Am I being gaslit as a man?
I am joking, Robert.
I don't want to be unreasonable and assume Incredibles 2 has an anti-male agenda or whatever. I have no idea what they were going for, obviously.
I don't think that this is a message movie in any way. I think it's purely luck of the draw that this happens to be dovetailing with MeToo and Time's Up. But obviously, time is up. Okay.
People are kind of starting to act like it was a socially conscious decision or something. I was just thinking, this will really mess Bob up, It's about as deep as it was.
It did. I haven't recovered.
But I understand there's a sort of girl power element to this movie because Elastigirl goes to fight and Mr. Incredible stays at home. Was that intentional?
You say.
Yeah.
You say.
No, it wasn't intentional. We made it up as we went on. It was an intentional. It was a pretty good idea, really. So he has to swallow a little bit of his masculinity. And Brad told me about the idea that he was going to be a stay-at-home dad for Bob Parr. I was a little resentful. I thought I should be out there crime fighting and busting things, and I'm learning how to give my wife the freedom to go out and do what she does the best. And that was exciting for me.
My interpretation is very unkind, assuming the worst. I know that I must be wrong.
And it's not because he thinks poorly of his wife, it's because he so believes in his own abilities, and he thinks it's so apparent to everyone the way it is to him.
Pixar probably didn't mean for Bob to come off as a sexist or egomaniac. I don't know. I do know that the way Bob was portrayed as a fan of the first film did not make me feel good. That bad feeling is compounded by a lack of clarity in the storytelling and my own personal biases, causing me to assume the worst.
You know.
This section is the whole point of calling this video an opinion piece. I want to be able to communicate how the movie made me feel, even if it wasn't what was intended, because that false impression might indicate a flaw in the storytelling. I can imagine the filmmakers tearing their hair out that a portion of their audience might think this about their movie. I think Disney does have a social agenda, but I'll take the cast and crew of Incredibles 2 at their words.
Well, I had the idea for the role switch when we were promoting the first film.
Brad Bird's vision for Incredibles 2 serendipitously aligned with the social agendas held by Disney at the time, and I suspect Disney was more than happy with Bob's treatment. Conversely, viewers like me were biased against Bob's treatment because of these outside social factors. Yet regardless of my bias or Disney's bias, Bob's treatment was inconsistent and poorly built up to. Even though there probably wasn't an agenda against Bob, I understand why people thought there was. I sympathize with the reasoning because I felt it, even if I'm not convinced of the conclusion.
I don't presume to. But you do. Revealed your opinion is.
I'm sure I'm taking this all the wrong way. But seriously, propping up Helen as a role model at the expense of her character, while breaking down Bob at the expense of his character, yeah, it bugs me. They're doing them both a disservice, in my opinion, not just Bob. I have no grounds to ascribe intent to the creators. I'm sure I'm just taking all this the wrong way. However, let me amend a previous statement. Having Helen be a flawed character is great, if the movie knows she is flawed and is going to do something interesting with it. If the movie doesn't know she's flawed, then it's awkward to me. Moreover, if the movie knows she's flawed, jokes about those flaws,
I'm such a hypocrite,
and then does nothing serious with those flaws, all the while dragging her male equal through the mud for his flaws, that seems dubious to me at best and mean-spirited at worst.
Nobody in the dead. Now we still need AA batteries.
Bob gloats that parenting will be easy.
I'll watch the kids, no problem. Easy.
Easy, huh? You're adorable.
And karma hits him like a ton of bricks. Helen thinks she'll be great.
You'll be great.
I know I will. But what about you?
You will be great.
I will be great.
And she is. No karma for her, unless you count being blindsided by Evelyn. But Bob suffers the same fate too, shortly after, on top of everything else he's been through. The climax is the perfect visual metaphor for Helen and Bob in Incredibles 2. Helen is flying high. Bob is drowning, trying to anchor everything else from crashing.
It's turning! It's working!
Furthermore, Bob has 3 different phases of character arcs and flaws that he has to work on in this movie. One for each kid. Dash, as I said earlier, teaches Bob to control his temper and be proactive in what his kids need. Violet teaches Bob to open up a bit, trust her, and admit he doesn't always know what's best. And Jack teaches Bob that even Mr. Incredible needs help from friends who have their own knowledge to share with Bob. Now, I'm pretty sure he learned this lesson in the first movie, that he wasn't a solo act anymore, but let's just try to ignore that. He still has 3 character arcs in this movie. Even though Bob's abrupt fit of madness and the excessive Jack gloating hurt my interest in his storyline halfway through, I can't deny that Bob has a fully fleshed out series of character arcs, building him into a better parent, even though he probably didn't need to be built into a better parent based on what we know from the first movie. Bob even takes on one of Helen's potential character arcs for her. Helen was the one yelling at Violet for interfering in the opening action scene.
Watch after Jack. But I thought we were gonna go.
You heard your mother.
Violet! Who's watching Jack? What are you kids doing? Get out of here! This thing's gonna blow! There's no time!
Again, in the dinner scene.
We talked about this. You're not old enough to decide about these things.
We are old enough to help out.
Yeah.
We want to fight bad guys.
No, you don't.
Now, it's true that Bob alone caused Tony's memory to be erased.
Last name is Rydinger.
But Helen also had a beef with Violet. Bob repairs it. Then, Helen just knows to be proud of Violet this time, when she interferes again in the climax.
You came for us?
Don't be mad.
Oh, sweetie. How could I be mad? I'm proud.
Helen even sounds psychotic when she says it.
How could I be mad? I'm proud.
Was her pride in her kids dependent on them succeeding? Or did Helen have a legitimate problem accepting that her kids were growing up and were ready to take on adult responsibilities, even though they had proven themselves in The Incredibles 1? I'd say it's the latter. Here's why. At the beginning of the movie, Helen was upset with her kids for getting involved. But there is no denying that if Dash and Violet hadn't gotten involved, four people would be dead. Plus, the kids had no effect on the bigger drill situation, either positive or negative, so I'd call that a net success for them. Helen chastises them for it. I think she's being overprotective in this assessment and needs to learn to let go a bit. They are kids, and she has a right to want to protect them, but they also need to grow in their experiences if they're going to be adults someday. Helen realizes this about herself, too, but she realizes it abruptly upon being rescued at the end of the movie.
Kids, what are you... You came for us?
Don't be mad.
It isn't unrealistic, but it's the movie letting Helen off the hook from another juicy character arc. Wait a minute, how could Helen work through her trust issues with Violet if they don't share screen time? Voyd. Voyd could fill the void. Voyd is young. She's the next generation of super and looks up to Helen as a mentor. Helen and Voyd could have been paired up together for an action scene or mission. Voyd would screw up or almost get hurt. In the heat of the moment, Helen's motherly instincts would kick in and she'd chastise Voyd in a similar fashion to how she'd chastise Violet. She's too young to be out here supering. She doesn't know what she's doing yet. Helen leaves Voyd behind, takes over the action scene alone, and succeeds. Afterwards, Voyd would get emotional, sad, yet angry. Helen was Voyd's mentor, yet she treated her like a child. Voyd would proclaim, "She's not a child, just inexperienced. She needs to learn to handle herself." Why was Helen babying her and not trusting her to handle things? To improve. Suddenly, Helen makes the connection between how she treated Voyd and how she treated her own daughter, Violet. Violet must be just as angry. With these two scenes added, now, when Violet rescues Helen, Helen's change of heart and newfound pride in Violet feels genuine, not abrupt. Because Helen has a cathartic reason to be sorry through Voyd.
Yay me.
And later, when Helen trusts Voyd to get her up to that plane and catch her from falling, even though Voyd struggles a bit at first, Helen's newfound trust in Voyd makes all the difference. Voyd works through her trouble, improves in the moment, and saves the day. The sequence takes on a whole new level of character catharsis and meaning this way. These two proposed scenes between Helen and Voyd would accomplish so much narratively. Helen would have a character arc, Voyd would have character growth and an emotional connection to the audience. That way, when she's hypnotized, we're more conflicted about her safety, and when she proves herself to Helen, we cheer for her redemptive success. And Helen and Voyd's relationship would help repair Helen and Violet's relationship. Moreover, at the end of the movie, this happens. They're taking the baby into an active shootout.
I don't think you're striking the proper tone here.
They're taking the baby into an active shootout. Helen looks pretty happy here. I think it's fair to say that Helen got over allowing her kids to fight.
God, let us out!
I'm just asking that this newfound confidence in the kids should be earned. But that's just a suggestion.
I'm proud.
Let's get back to the kids. Dash's subplot about math has no payoff. Did he get an A? The boy could use a character arc. Wait a minute, didn't I say earlier that there were too many storylines going on already? Yes, but why is Dash left out? You remember how fast he was placing that tack on his teacher's chair in the first movie?
See? You see? Well, you don't see it?
What if he was using his speed powers to cheat on tests? Like he was so fast that he could glimpse and quickly read something and then get back to the desk. But the teachers don't know how he's cheating. They just know he copied off everybody's papers or something. Like it was a short answer essay instead of multiple choice. And he's like copying off of everybody's papers. Like somehow he managed to plagiarize everyone in the class. Stuff like that. That could be fun. And it would bring up the issue of the ethical use of his powers, which would also be relevant to the plot of superhero legalization. What is ethical use of your powers? Like, let this stuff stew. There's some great stuff there. Instead, Dash is just there. I guess he likes to use remote controllers.
Dash! Stop it! No, Dash!
Not sure if that's a character arc so much as a motif. And the only payoff for the living room trapdoors that he opened was, of course, to embarrass Bob. At one point, he tries to fire real rockets in a showroom full of civilians.
Huh? What are you doing? This is not a toy. That's a rocket launcher.
Launch the rocket!
As a man who was once a boy, sure, I'd like to see things explode on TV. But Dash, of all boys, should have respect for the damage rockets can do.
Mom? We're dead! We're dead! Launch the rocket!
Frick! Even the Incredible with the least screen time gets undermined. All right, third kid, Jack. After the 1 hour mark, he completely takes over Bob's side of the movie. I don't know if this was always the plan from Pixar or if this was due to audience polling or test screenings, since the kids in the audience loved the Jack. But the baby hogs too much screen time from other characters, particularly around the time that Bob drops him off at Edna Mode's place. Jack starts getting cocky here. What up, haters? This is my movie now. Edna Mode abruptly bonds with Jack.
Oh my God. Yes.
Does variations of her same visual gags from part 1 and creates another suit for Jack. While there is a short film that shows that she struggles with Jack, in the movie itself, it comes off like she had no problems at all.
I enjoyed the assignment. Babysitting this one, I do for free, darling.
She trained Jack to be a gentleman overnight and had leftover time to create a brand new invention that controls all his powers.
I have doubtlessly exceeded your expectations for a single night's work.
It's a cartoon. It's allowed to be unrealistic. Even though I said earlier that Brad Bird would like us to judge it not as a cartoon, my main problem is, again, how insulting it is to Bob.
Why did I go through all the pain?
Done properly, parenting is a heroic act.
Who is she to lecture Bob, father of 3, on proper parenting? This is the point where I stopped enjoying the one half of the movie I was enjoying.
I am not a baby person, Robert. I have no baby facilities. I am an artist.
Want to give Edna something new to do in this movie? Recruit Edna for the climax. A whole bunch of superheroes are meeting on a fancy yacht to sign an historic agreement live on television. Edna used to design for the gods. She would leap at the opportunity to sell her fashions to these bigwigs. She could have gotten entangled with the kids' rescue mission while they're infiltrating the yacht and saving the day. Her unique knowledge of superheroes and her gadgets could have come in handy. In fact, why would the kids not attempt to recruit Edna rather than go at it alone?
We can't go to Ease.
You can't go to Ease? Why?
You saw those goggles they put on Lucius? They were wearing them too.
Is Edna a suspect? So the logic is the hypnotized supers were wearing goggles. Edna makes superhero goggles, so Edna can't be trusted? Or she's being held hostage, being forced to make the goggles. So
Take us to DevTech.
It's a better idea to charge right into the heart of DevTech, where all the hypnotized supers are located? Is it just because it's your parents there and you don't know who to trust? But if Edna can't be trusted and is creating technology to control superheroes, why do the kids trust the tablet Edna made to control Jack Jack? Edna gave that tablet to Bob the same morning the kids were attacked by the brainwashed supers. You sure the tablet's safe? Edna also has GPS trackers in the Incredibles suits. Wearing those suits reveals your location if she's compromised.
We can't go to Ease.
What are you talking about?
Wouldn't it be easier to, quote-unquote, save Edna and figure out what she knows about the situation?
Pull yourself together!
It could have been a lot of fun. Maybe Edna had a little black book of old superhero clients that she designed for, let's call them up, to fight the hypnotized supers. Pick them up! Why are the kids going in alone? But I get it. They're kids.
Kids are stupid.
Since director Brad Bird voices Edna, I understand him not wanting to inflate his own role in the story. It speaks well on him. Unfortunately, it means for Edna, it's deja vu all over again. Speaking of which, all this Jack Jack has powers stuff also irks me because I thought the Pars knew this at the end of the first movie. I thought that Helen and Bob had found out Jack Jack had powers during the 3-month time jump, which is why the baby is triumphantly suiting up with the family. I admit that the implication that Bob and Helen know Jack Jack has powers at the end of the first film isn't nearly as strong as the implication that superheroes were supposed to be legal again at the end of the first film.
Something's happening. What's happening?
But come on! What about that babysitter call?
Pardon me, Jack Jack is fine.
Weird things are happening. I'm freaking out. Okay, answer me this. How would Dicker know to erase Kari's memories unless Bob or Helen found out that Kari saw Jack Jack's powers and then told Dicker to erase Kari's memories in the first place?
A kid named Tony. You might have seen her in the outfit without her mask.
Talkative time?
Don't know.
This isn't conclusive. There is a deleted scene which communicates that Dicker erased Kari's memory without Bob and Helen's knowledge.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Fire. Kari, did you notice anything odd about Jack Jack? Not that I remember. It's a blank. But all those phone messages you left us. Phone messages?
You don't remember.
No. Uh-oh.
So the filmmakers were aware of the inconsistency at least, but how did Dicker find out about it? Did they tell Dicker to erase her memory because she saw Syndrome?
BS.
There could be another explanation. Maybe Jack Jack Attack is not canon to Incredibles 2.
They don't think I was hiding something.
Don't you, Mr.
know what I
Dicker?
mean?
Sure, kid.
I just wish I could forget the whole thing.
You will, kid. You will. You will.
Maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to it. Still, the impression that Brad Bird is intentionally holding back forward progression to make a safe sequel with topical elements is starting to stack up high for me. Or maybe he honestly forgot the story.
What do you mean? You designed it.
I never look back, darling. It distracts from the now.
Or just wanted to explore things that he had glossed over, but he ends up glossing over other things. So anyway, the kids take over the climax with poor preparation. On the island, they were flying by the seat of their pants and running away most of the time. Here, they're going toe-to-toe with other supers and drop-kicking them fools. Sheesh, where did this come from, Violent Man? Earlier, the kids and Bob are eager to fight bad guys.
We want to fight bad guys.
No, you don't.
So why not have Mr. Incredible bond with the kids over their powers? He could promise to train them to be better heroes if they behave themselves, do their schoolwork, and don't tell their mother.
I assume she knows.
Are you kidding? I can't tell her about this.
The island incident was luck. I wanted there to be more bonding and groundwork laid for the kids to take the spotlight at the end of the movie. So when it happens, I know they are capable of it and that the threat is real because they are capable. I never believed that the kids were in danger here, which was not the case in the first movie. You remember the security guards from The Incredibles 1? They didn't flinch when shooting at children. That is exciting and suspenseful. Incredibles 2 can't up the stakes from that. Rather, it removes all that gritty threat from the first one. Our brainwashed heroes are knocked out by a multi-ton baby. They should have been crushed. The worst that happens, even including the adult heroes, is a torn sleeve. Oh no, this is my favorite suit. Oh, and this. But Helen recovers from hypoxia, nosedives the plane, and catches her. We can't even kill the villain in this movie? What about injuring her at least? She's walking around after this! To be fair, none of the good guys are hurt in The Incredibles 1 either. So what separates The Incredibles 1 from Incredibles 2 then? For me, it's the villain's willingness to do harm, coupled with how gravely serious the adults are taking it. This chilling speech from Helen.
Remember the bad guys on those shows you used to watch on Saturday mornings? Well, these guys are not like those guys. They won't exercise restraint because you're children. They will kill you if they get the chance.
This is a cartoon, but not a lightweight cartoon.
Don't touch my sister!
These guards will fire guns at children. Syndrome has already killed dozens of supers off screen. He doesn't hesitate to blow up a plane with children on it. He eggs on Bob to crush his assistant.
Now, go ahead.
It'll be easy, like breaking a toothpick.
Show me.
And his henchmen are biting it in explosions. Yes, the good guys come out unscathed, but the original Incredibles lets you know that this was in spite of their dangerous environment, not that there was no danger at all. By comparison, Evelyn's screenslaver doesn't feel as personally threatening. There's something very detached about runaway vehicles. It's very non-committal for a bad guy. Maybe someone will die, or maybe Elastigirl will save them. Evelyn kind of washes her hands of it.
So you're the screenslaver.
Yes and no.
There was a lot of potential with the brainwashing. This scene of Dash opening the door is great and creepy.
Hello there, little fella. Hello.
Good one-off scene.
Right, Elastigirl?
It makes me wish that Evelyn had hypnotized more regular citizens and used them as bargaining chips or an insurance policy in case her plan went haywire. If the supers don't obey, command the minds of the whole entire city to leap to their doom.
Yeah, leap to their doom.
Bye-bye.
There's so much more you can do if everybody's really tied to their technology. You really could wield the whole city against them, have them do whatever you want, but instead you want to convince them in some sort of ethical way, but still not ethical because you're hypnotizing supers to make them look bad.
You need the simplest version of the idea in order for it to grow naturally in your subject's mind. It's a very subtle art.
The citizens have to organically come to the belief that superheroes are dangerous or it won't stick.
It's the only way it will stick. It has to seem self-generated.
Eames, I am impressed.
But so much time was spent building up supers for the public. Wouldn't they still be highly skeptical of this abrupt shift? Maybe there needed to be another smaller incident to lay the groundwork before the climax. She could have brainwashed citizens to attack a super, could have had a hidden camera or something, and then Evelyn edits the footage together to make it look like a superhero on human incident. Maybe that's too much for a kid's movie, but there's a lot of too much stuff in both of these Incredibles movies for kids, and they're fine. I know that you have to make constant eye contact with the screens to be hypnotized, so a lot of these suggestions don't work. But then what's the deal with this girl?
What does your sign say?
Did Evelyn slide her some cash to carry that sign and then run away? The scene would be much creepier if it were implying that random people that look just like everyone else are hypnotized by Screenslaver, ready to attack Helen when she least expects it. We're coming. What I'm saying is that there are so many better ways for Evelyn to accomplish her goal of defaming supers, especially with mind control through television screens. Or just to be a more threatening villain in general.
She is not all rosy and perfect. I like that she's a female bad guy.
Oh, shucks.
Evelyn is a genius, hopefully, who can be converted at some point to doing good.
What? She's a female villain, so we underplayed the threat so we can maybe turn her into a good guy in The Incredibles 3?
The fact that you saved me doesn't make you right.
By the time we get to the end of the movie, the tension has evaporated completely when I was told that all Violet and Dash had to do is remove the goggles to stop the hypnotized supers.
No!
Violet and Dash are very overpowered against this weakness. I don't know if you know this, but Dash has super speed. He could easily remove everyone's goggles in the room before anyone knows he's there. And Violet can turn invisible. Hello? Violet sees Lucius get turned by the goggles. Violet knows about this weakness. When Voyd tries to put a pair on her, Violet reacts like she knows what will happen. Well, if she knows, then why don't her and Dash do anything about it? Especially when their powers mean that no one would see them coming. Violet dropkicks Voyd, knocks her out, and still leaves her with the goggles on.
There seems to be no sign of intelligent life anywhere.
The movie is treating me and its characters like idiots to extend the climax, prolonging a weak threat. Sheesh. Speaking of not caring, let's talk about Winston Dever.
Spectacular.
He's a red herring for Evelyn. His outbursts
I disagree strongly.
and frustrated mumbles
What do you want on your tombstone?
are to make us suspect that he is Screenslaver.
I want you to have this. A memento.
However, as a consequence of him being a suspect in a mystery, Winston is never fleshed out as a character. Why does he need to be fleshed out as a character? Well, he doesn't, but then this happens.
Strap in now. It's for your own good.
No! This is!
Why was I laughing? What's the big deal? There isn't a big deal. That's why I'm laughing. Winston is either being overdramatic or something is missing. The filmmakers are making Winston's stance a bigger deal than the story actually earned. It's as if there were a missing subplot with Evelyn being very controlling in her and Winston's sibling relationship. And
No! This
is meant to be an audience cheering moment. Winston has finally broken free of his sister's toxic, manipulative clutches. The only problem is there's no backstory for Winston's big moment. What backstory? Well, first off, Winston and Evelyn weren't kids when their father was killed, and then when their mother died. Based on the age of Violet, I would guess that supers were only banned a decade and a half or so earlier. The Devers are in their, 40s, maybe early 50s? They were adults building up their business when the news came that their father was shot, and they fundamentally disagreed on the politics surrounding the shooting. This is juicy story stuff. Business partners and siblings, no less, are shaken to their core and disagree with how to fix things. There is so much potential here. A familial bond is ripped apart by differing ideologies, but they're maintaining a happy facade for the sake of their business. This could have easily paralleled the ideological disagreement between Bob and Helen from the dinner table scene. Maybe the two of them could have not reconciled at the beginning of the movie, and there could have still been tension about their disagreement. And then, later on in the second act, Helen has a conversation with Winston, in which Winston laments letting politics distance himself from his sister. His story would serve as a warning to Helen to patch things up with Bob before it's too late. Then, when hypnotized Helen is fighting Bob, there's an emotional resonance because she was looking to patch things up, but now they may never get the chance, and she has to watch helplessly as she's forced to fight her husband. This would play into the idea that Helen was a bit hypocritical at the dinner table scene, trying to control the conversation and being passive-aggressive toward Bob. Helen would see an extreme example of continuing down this path through the Devers' sibling relationship falling apart. She could learn through their mistakes and grow. There's some wasted potential in this movie for thematical overlap. Why would you have the Devers be siblings in the first place? Why would you have two familial arguments going on at the same time, have the characters interacting with each other from the different scenarios, and not have them learning from one another? I don't know. This is just me rambling on a tangent again, making suggestions. Anyway, back to the Devers. I don't know what backstory Pixar had in mind. Was Evelyn always the talented, though passive-aggressive type, manipulating her brother's charisma and love for her to get ahead with her talents?
Your brother runs DevTech.
I don't want his job. I invent. He sells.
What are you getting away from?
Company stuff. My brother, mostly.
But you love him. You two were this company, yin and yang.
Yeah. Your brother is a child.
Or did this rift between them only begin when their parents passed away? Either way, there is a blatant frustration and dissatisfaction between the two of them.
My tardy sister, Evelyn.
And I'm scolding myself, so you don't have to, Winston.
We hear Evelyn's take on things, but to maintain an air of mystery around Winston, we never hear his perspective. Even one scene of Winston opening up about Evelyn being manipulative behind the scenes would have made this moment at the end more satisfying. But that comes at an expense. The viewer will suspect Evelyn is the villain. But then I ask, so? Really? The Devers were the only two suspects anyway, because they were the only ones with a motive.
So?
Besides Bob.
And I would do a great job, regardless of what Devers pie charts say or whatever.
That would be the final straw in destroying Bob's character. And maybe Frozone?
Which seems wrong, doesn't it? Perhaps you'd be interested in changing that law?
He was the first one to meet with the Devers. He goes missing a lot, and he had a pretty creepy scene coming out of the fog at the pool earlier.
No lifeguard on duty. Swim at your own risk.
Like I said, the Devers were the only two suspects anyway. Why not play up their sibling rivalry in the movie? Make them both have disparaging words about one another that could implicate the other as the screenslaver. The filmmakers could have shown a self-awareness here. They could have been like, look, we know the audience knows that one of these two is the villain. So we're going to play them against each other for tension while also developing their history and encouraging Winston to assert his independence. That way, when he over-dramatically asserts his independence, it's rewarding, not silly. Like he's being over the top, like he knows he's in a movie or something. I'm not against having off-screen backstories and implying depth to side characters that you don't have time to explore. That is good world building. However, in this particular case, I feel like I'm missing out on something, which then makes me second guess the Devers' sibling relationship throughout the whole entire movie. Why did you make them siblings? Did it matter?
I'm sorry, but she'll go to prison.
Well, I'm sorry she's rich and will probably get no more than a slap on the wrist.
First of all, Violet, I like you.
Why is Winston making jokes when his sister is going to jail? Where's the sense of betrayal, the grief? After losing his father and mother, now Winston has lost his sister. What is the point if he doesn't care? Admittedly, it does fit his character. Winston is a peppy marketeer.
Hey, it's working!
An unflinching optimist.
A potential threat. Perfect!
Unless he's talking about his dead parents. And I can understand the filmmaking perspective for making him so upbeat right here. Now is not a good time for grief if you want the audience to walk away feeling elated and satisfied with your summer blockbuster. But come on! Winston's sister reveals she's so radically opposed to Winston's worldview that she used their beloved dead father's company resources to become a villain bent on destroying Winston's superhero idols. What is the point if he doesn't care? He's bottling it up, AE. He's falling back on his marketing persona as a comfort. Okay then, let me rephrase myself. What is the point if I don't get to see him care? Ideally, there would be a full-blown confrontation scene between Winston and Evelyn on the plane right here. This is the perfect time for a dramatic argument. Let it all out, buddy! Let her have it. Of course, you would have to change the timing of events to make this work, because in the current movie, the hypnotized supers were already dealt with, meaning that a full-blown argument scene between Winston and Evelyn would give our heroes too much time to stop the plane before it takes off. But I think this is an argument worth accommodating. Currently, Winston would rather jump out of a plane in cowardice than confront his own sister.
No!
The filmmakers insist that the Incredibles franchise is all about family.
What excited me about the idea in the first place was not the superheroes, it was that it was about the family dynamic. Everyone kind of relates to that. It's primarily about what family is.
I think the characters are really honest portrayals of family. That's just really charming. And again, it comes from that family bond.
I don't know a lot of movies where the family are the central heroic unit.
And I think if we say family one more time, we get some sort of award. Yeah.
What about this family? The fact that Winston and Evelyn's sibling relationship payoff is just 2 lines of theatrics is the movie admitting that their relationship didn't matter.
It's actually pretty cool because that's like you're still and more complex than my character.
You walk and talk a lot.
Like this.
But it's also real, like a little puppet guy who's simple in the brain.
So, yeah, I laughed. Winston's silly.
No! This is!
Hey, what about Frozone? There isn't much to talk about. Frozone is unscathed. In fact, Incredibles 2 puts Lucius's core roles of best friend / uncle figure to the ultimate test, and Lucius steps up to the plate. When Bob calls, Lucius is a good best friend, helps to babysit for the afternoon, and offers advice.
You need some solid outside-the-box thinking.
Then, when the kids need an uncle figure, Frozone doesn't hesitate to show up and place himself between the kids and multiple superheroes, clashing against overwhelming odds in an act of self-sacrifice. Frozone comes off great, despite not having much personal investment in the superhero re-legalization campaign.
Which seems wrong, doesn't it?
In The Incredibles 1, Frozone was sitting right next to Bob, listening to police scanners for nights on end, lying to his wife as well, in hopes of getting some illegal superhero action. Moreover, Frozone is the first superhero approached by DevTech about the re-legalization campaign. He's the one to pitch the idea to The Incredibles.
Winston Dever
wants to talk with me, with you two, about hero stuff.
I really appreciate how they handled his character, but him being excluded from that campaign feels wrong. And since we're on the topic of the campaign, it would have been nice to hear the opinions of superheroes who disagree. Bob and Helen didn't just get themselves kicked out of Dicker's program.
From now on, you're on your own.
No, this time they got the whole superhero benefits program shut down.
The program's been shut down.
What?
Thousands of superheroes no longer have funding for secret identity protection and relocation. Some superheroes should be pissed, specifically with Bob, Helen, and Lucius, for losing them their protections. It could add some interesting conflict to the story and/or create further screenslaver motives and suspects to investigate. Maybe there are superheroes that actually oppose re-legalization too. Lots of fun questions surrounding a story like this, and storytelling is all about exploring questions.
It is time for their secret identity to become their only identity.
Another thing real quick, Evelyn knows that the Incredibles are the Parr family, right? I assume she does, because Winston calls Violet by her real name.
First of all, Violet.
Not to mention that Winston's housing the family in one of his mansions.
It's my house. I have several. I'm not using that one.
Why would Winston know their identities and not Evelyn?
You two were this company, yin and yang.
Yeah.
And if Evelyn does know their secret identities, is this not a concern going forward with her being jailed?
Should we be worried?
The movie doesn't address it or speculate about it. Wouldn't the Parrs living in a mansion owned by the head of DevTech seem conspicuous when they look exactly like the superheroes now working for DevTech? Okay, this secret identity criticism is a nitpick, but is it?
She closed down her mask and it's her.
The opening scene told me that secret identities were important. So important that we needed to mind wipe a teenage boy without consent. Yet Evelyn, the villain, knowing the family's secret identities wasn't worth a wrap-up scene? Why don't we see her get mind wiped? Are secret identities only a concern when it's convenient? We're not sure what to do with this Tony guy in the movie. Oh, we gotta bring back Evelyn in the future.
Oh, shucks.
Evelyn is a genius, hopefully, who can be converted at some point to doing good.
Arbitrary levels of justice. Heartwarming. Think about it. They'll mind wipe an underage boy, but when Winston calls Violet in public...
Violet, I like you.
Everyone just laughs it off? Bob and Helen, you mind wiped a little boy to protect your little girl, and now this guy's calling out her name in the street. Maybe no civilians were in earshot. I'm perfectly cool with the Clark Kent wears glasses, Superman doesn't wear glasses logic that is in place in this universe. Violet was completely unrecognizable until she took off the mask. It's silly, but there's a precedent for it, and it's meta humor. But a villain knowing their identities when a little boy dare not? Did they lobotomize the totally wicked kid too?
That was totally wicked!
How did Winston react to learning the secret identities of his superhero idols? That was glossed over.
Mr. Incredible!
Hello. Unless... neither of the Devers know their identities? Somehow? Is Violet's superhero name Violet? Screw me. You know, I think that Clark Kent might be Clark Man.
Exactly how would you know that, Kent?
Just a first impression.
Of course, I'm not sure how secret these heroes' identities were in the first place. A lot of superheroes were enrolled in Dicker's government-funded program. I assume, for the purposes of cleanup and relocation, Dicker had a list of superheroes and their true identities. Well, who all had access to Dicker's list? Winston trained under Dicker.
Winston Dever.
I checked him out. He's legit, trained under Dicker.
My father was so proud that I was even remotely connected to you guys.
Does Winston now have the list of supers and their identities?
I flew them in from all over. They've all been in hiding. Secret identities and names they've given themselves.
And if Winston does have access to Dicker's list, does that mean Evelyn had access as well? Evelyn was Screenslaver. Is every superhero on that list compromised? Does Evelyn have a contingency plan to release this list as blackmail to get out of jail?
Violet! Who's watching Jack Jack? Ash is watching him!
All right, so secret identities may be a small thing in this universe, but the inconsistency with how serious the characters treat it does hurt my suspension of disbelief.
Well, I didn't read a screenplay because there wasn't really one.
There's never a whole script that you could read. There's like 5 movies in this movie.
5 different movies, and they all work in concert with each other.
And they all work together.
It's very sophisticated.
Incredibles 2 has a cluttered narrative and character issues that really start to pile up when you get into the second half.
Evelyn, she's escaping!
Well, go after her.
This scene is supposed to be about Helen trusting him to be a responsible father and take care of things while she's away.
Go! We've got this.
And Bob is now meant to be secure with letting Helen take the spotlight and stop the villain. It's thematically relevant, yet unsatisfying within the context of the first movie. In The Incredibles 1, Helen refused to let Bob run off and face Syndrome alone.
Not a chance. You're my husband, I'm with you. For better or worse. What is this to you, playtime?
Despite his concerns about losing his family,
I can't lose you again!
I'm not strong enough.
Helen made him realize they were stronger together.
If we work together, you won't have to be.
This scene in Incredibles 2 puts Helen and Bob in the exact opposite roles as the first film, yet it's now appropriate for Bob to let Helen face Evelyn alone?
Well, go after her.
While what? I watch helplessly from the sidelines? I don't think so.
I'm asking you to wait with the kids.
And I'm telling you, not a chance.
What about the kids? Jack Jack! Who's gonna go? We've got this.
Was the end goal to show that Helen now disagrees with her old opinion that they were stronger together? Some things are personal.
Oh, I'm such a hypocrite.
If that's the case, it was clunky and Bob deserves an apology.
I have to do this alone.
And this will make you stronger?
Yes. No.
That's what this is? Some sort of workout?
With all due respect, if you alone had handled the Underminer, things would have been different.
This was divisive language tempting Helen to reject the good message from the first movie.
I'm with you, for better or worse.
If you alone had handled the Underminer...
And Helen doesn't! She takes the villain's advice and faces the villain alone.
And then you died.
I don't want to die.
But it's good for some reason. The biggest difference, the message.
I love you, but if we're gonna make this work, you gotta be more than Mr. Incredible. You know that, don't you?
Bob learned to value his family, that he wasn't a solo act anymore. Helen, in The Incredibles 2, seems to learn the opposite.
Go!
What excited me about the idea in the first place was not the superheroes, it was that it was about the family dynamic.
Putting these moments side by side raises an eyebrow or two. Yes, the context is different. Helen is not about to single-handedly take on a trained, super-killing, giant AI robot, but Evelyn's plane is clearly visible from where they are all standing on the bridge. Why are Helen and Voyd running up the stairs? Voyd has a line of sight to the top deck from the bridge, create a portal, everyone walk through it, stop the plane together, and then you're free to worry about the runaway yacht. Voyd could have done something more productive, like looping the boat endlessly in the water, and then they could have slowed it down at their leisure. We even get a shot of Frozone already up top trying to slow the boat before Evelyn even takes off. That means that Frozone found a faster way to the top deck than Voyd and Helen, who were still running up the stairs. Not only do you waste time with this conversation, you then take the longest, most unintuitive route possible to get up to the deck. Once again, prolonging a weak threat to make the climax feel more substantial and to give Voyd a poorly set up payoff, along with Winston's big moments and Evelyn's fundamental differences. Speaking of poorly set up payoffs, this Helen moment doesn't even work within the context of this movie.
Finish your mission.
I can't just go!
This whole review, I've been making an argument that Helen needed a more fleshed out, internal character struggle.
To help my family, I gotta leave it. To fix the law, I gotta break it.
I based this argument mostly on the first movie.
But this, our family, is what's happening now, Bob. And you are missing this.
I'm aware that there is a good counter-argument. Millions of new mothers go to work, leaving their kids at daycare, and don't have a major emotional arc or withdrawal about it. On top of that, Helen is a superhero.
That's true.
Such a job will require heightened amounts of stoicism, discipline, and acceptance.
Calm down.
I acknowledge that. But then the film itself hits you with this.
I can't just go! What about the kids? Jack! Who's gonna...
Helen has a last-minute anxiety attack over leaving her family for work, aka catching the bad guy. It is meant to be her character's final cathartic payoff.
Go! We've got this.
Putting all of her fears at ease and solidifying her prior development throughout the movie. But as I have argued, there wasn't any development.
I'm in.
It's confusing because this payoff does have a setup.
It's not that simple, Bob. I want to protect the kids.
But it's a setup that wasn't built upon or reinforced by everything in between. All of her fears and neuroses about abandoning her family that are all of a sudden bubbling to the surface feel disconnected from the reality of the rest of the movie.
It was so great!
Helen hasn't had any concerns, regrets, or fears about her decision to leave her family ever since she left her family. She ripped that band-aid off and was totally cool with it. The one incident on the phone thus felt more like a mistrust of Bob rather than the first signs of Helen's trepidation and guilt for leaving her family.
Jack.
We had an accident. I knew it. I'm coming home right now. I never should.
And you never should we, what? You don't think I can do this?
Sorry.
There's a little bit of a hitch in Bob's voice that I hear on the phone, and I am ready to like throw it all over and come home to, to save the family from Bob.
And I'm not even advocating for big emotions or freakouts. I'm asking for subtle acknowledgments that Helen's slightly struggling through a change in her life. Little things. A longing look in an empty hotel room, her arm falling down on the empty side of the bed where Bob would normally sleep, realizing that she's been working too late at night and hasn't had the time to call her family for a week because they are all sleeping. Maybe Helen could have a personal calendar with her and she notices that she's missing an important event for one of her kids. There are any number of small 10-second long ways to show that Helen is not entirely cool with being away from the family. Acknowledgements that should happen in the 49 minutes between this phone call freakout
I knew it. I'm coming home right now. I never should.
and her final freakout with reassurance on the boat.
I can't just go. What about the kids? Jack, who's gonna...
The Incredibles 1 prefaced Helen as a passionate family woman. Incredibles 2 bookends Helen's character with freakouts based on said passionate family woman persona. Thus, my logic is that Incredibles 2 is hinting at an internal character struggle for Helen that was never explored.
Go.
Wait a minute. I just realized that this moment between Bob and Helen is the only bit of closure to their role reversal in the movie. Well, it's there, but it's very underdone compared to all their discussions at the beginning of the movie. This is the exact opposite problem as the Winston-Evelyn closure. Ideally, you would want the closure for Helen and Bob's role swap to occur after the climax, not during it, giving them time to settle down and reflect. When it comes to Bob giving Helen the spotlight,
Well, go after her. Finish your mission.
Versus stopping the villain together, there's a middle ground. Everyone worked together to stop Evelyn. Then, during the subsequent news coverage, Bob allows Helen to take the spotlight and all the credit on camera, thus proving that he can now set aside his ego. But then, Helen pulls Bob back onto the camera and gives him some credit too, redeeming Bob in the eyes of the public after the damage that he caused at the beginning. It's the best of both worlds, and it shows a mutual respect between the couple. And another thing, why is the debate over?
The legal status of superheroes is hereby restored.
Unfortunately, the debate is not over.
Heck, I would argue that the debate never began, but why is it over? In fact, the events of Incredibles 2 should place superhero re-legalization under harsher scrutiny for a few reasons. First off, superheroes can be controlled.
We no longer serve you. We serve only us. May the fittest survive.
This might have some scary new implications.
Superheroes have...
It introduces a whole new aspect to the superhero debate, which needs careful consideration.
Hello?
This incident should not instill confidence, much less be the final tipping point in a debate. I guess they technically signed it already, but that seems a little... might want to rethink that. Secondly, the head of the superhero legalization campaign is the villain's brother.
Spectacular.
This calls into question the authenticity of the campaign itself. Were Winston and Evelyn colluding together to deceive the public? Was this whole movement born out of sincerity for the superhero's plight, or as a marketing gimmick to create a permanent association between DevTech and superheroes? How did DevTech's finances look before the legalization? I bet they're skyrocketing now.
Hey, it's working!
Maybe those benefits were worth Evelyn getting a minor slap on the wrist. Because lastly, let's not forget about the actual collusion I mentioned previously.
I know the chief of police. There won't be a problem.
DevTech used its financial influences,
worldwide connections,
and networking to convince cops, the news media, and a politician to ignore Mrs. Incredible's criminal activity. Who's to say he can't persuade some important people to let Evelyn off the hook? If the public were to find that out, combined with Winston being related to and business partners with the villain who made the whole legalization campaign thrust forward, there would be crazy division and calls for further investigations, calling into question the legitimacy of everything. Luckily, one of the local news networks is in DevTech's pocket.
Chad, I'll get my brother to set up an exclusive with him tonight on the newscast.
And they probably won't look into these conflicts of interest. What a well-earned, happy ending. Let's compare it to The Incredibles 1.
How does it compare?
Yes, Bob was under the payroll of the villain, which at first could seem damning, but there was an island's worth of evidence to acquit him of wrongdoing. Files and dead bodies, and Mirage seemed pretty happy to help them out at the end.
How do I get into the computer?
Say please.
The Syndrome incident showed the public the extreme side of their superhero persecution through Syndrome's merciless slaughtering of beloved superheroes. And the AI robot attack reintroduced the public to the idea of a threat that only superheroes could thwart. Granted, that incident realistically was not a final tipping point for superhero re-legalization, but at least it was a proper tipping point. It would convince people to head in that direction. Incredibles 2's resolution, by comparison, it's sugar-coated dirty politics.
It really is a happy movie, folks, we swear.
You have to not think about what people liked the first time, because then you either go away from those ideas, in a restrictive way, or you go straight at them.
Lastly, and maybe most importantly, Incredibles 2 feels redundant. At the end of the first movie, I knew that superheroes were legalized, Violet was about to go on her first date, and a family outing was interrupted by a crime. At the end of Incredibles 2, I knew superheroes were legalized, Violet was about to go on her first date, and a family outing was interrupted by a crime.
Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.
Superheroes are illegal.
Incredibles 2 regresses to give the illusion of progression to the exact same place. What has changed?
Is different okay?
Hey, different is...
The Pars have a new house.
This is our new house.
Dicker's out, Winston's in. Wait, maybe Dicker's still in, he's in the courtroom, he's over there. It's nice that he showed up. Everyone reacts to Jack's powers.
You have...
It's totally skippable. This is stuff that could have been explained as progression between movies. Not to mention that Helen's story in Incredibles 2 borrows heavily from Bob's story in The Incredibles 1. You probably heard this many times before. There's a superhero incident that forces Dicker to shut down the program.
From now on, you're on your own.
Shut down.
What?
Dinner table scene.
How fast
What
do
are
you
we
think
teaching
you
our
are?
kids?
We are not encouraging this.
I'm not
Even when the law
encouraging,
is
I'm just asking how
disrespectful.
fast
I'll be back later.
Where are you going?
Hey, where are you two going?
The fresh
Wednesday.
air is especially good tonight.
If Jack...
What are we doing here, Bob? We're protecting people.
A rich tech genius invites an Incredible under the payroll.
The supers aren't gone, Mr. Incredible. You're still
legal
here.
again.
You can still do great things.
The company is sending me to.
The important thing is we're out of the motel.
Yeah. This is
Deborah
Mr.
here.
Incredible.
This is Elastigirl. I'm in.
Said tech genius has a guise of benevolence, only to turn out to be the villain, interested in eliminating supers.
You are good.
You know, I was right to idolize you. Nothing to lose.
Superheroes keep us weak.
And
You're
we're
gonna help
everyone
me
super.
make supers illegal forever.
No one will be.
Helen's in trouble. I need someone to watch the
I
kids.
should be back tonight.
What's at the ship at Def Tech? And why are you in
Nothing.
your super suit?
They've
Mom
probably
and Dad's
done the
lives
same
could
to
be in
Mom.
jeopardy.
Came for
Violet,
us.
it's not my
Don't be
fault.
mad.
For your own good.
Next time you gamble,
No.
bet your own life.
This is.
Evelyn, he's getting away from it.
Edna stuff.
What does that mean?
It means fire, Robert.
Ask Tony out, etc., etc.
The business part of the movie business always likes to think in terms of patterns and things that can be understood and hopefully repeated so that the next quarter is healthy. And I just think all of that leads you astray.
Funny enough, one plotline that they didn't repeat, the villain being a former fan of the main hero, might have made Evelyn's plan make more sense if she believed in Elastigirl, was inspired by her feminism to pursue a career above family.
Settle down, are you kidding? I'm at the top of my game. Girls, come on. Leave the saving of the world to the men? I don't think so.
Now, she wants to bring her old hero back to the forefront to inspire all the little girls to do the same. Become career women just like her.
Must be nice for you, being out front after all this time.
Then, Evelyn learns that Elastigirl is dedicated to motherhood and doesn't fully endorse what she used to preach.
I don't think so.
Evelyn feels betrayed by this in the middle of the campaign and then tries to sabotage supers at the last minute. Maybe it could work. At least it would explain the last minute nature of the plan.
It is done. The world is super again.
These redundant plot elements don't just hurt the viewing experience, they also undermine the Incredibles themselves. Only 3 months ago, they went through practically the exact same scenario, yet Helen didn't learn a thing from Bob's mistakes. And Bob doesn't have any hesitancy. He's not going to pull Helen aside and say, hey, let's think twice about trusting another rich tech genius who's a big fan of ours.
Well, it's not a fair comparison.
Of course.
Bob is just so blinded by wanting to be a superhero again, just like last time. You know, almost getting your kids killed should have seared this lesson into his memory. Incredibles 2's insulting, but only when you think about it.
Some of the attitude on the internet is, you better not disappoint me. And that kind of doesn't really inspire you to go do your best work. You kind of just feel like, I'm hanging it up.
I don't hate The Incredibles 2. It has its moments. I loved Evelyn pointing out how stupid her father was for not going into the panic room, and then Winston's outburst.
Or Dad could have taken Mom to the safe room as soon as he knew there was trouble.
I disagree strongly. But
The image of skyscrapers peaking atop a foggy night, beautiful production design, Dicker in the program cameos with Rydinger.
Know what I mean?
Sure, kid.
Most of the family stuff, particularly a fun outing to a restaurant.
I think it's Tap.
Well, it is very good.
Excellent tap. The excellent music.
we gotta get to my car.
That motorcycle chase, Jack, early on. That laughably ridiculous final scene. There's a drive-by shooting in broad daylight, and people are just like, huh, well, gotta go watch a movie. What are you supposed to do, to be fair? I don't know. Helen and Bob meditating out at a hotel poolside, the light from within the waves refracting off their faces on a warm night. As they reflect on their troubles, they quietly find humor in the absurdity of their situation, making each other smile. A great moment between best friends. Good cinematography. As Evelyn reflects on her past, she faces a reflection in the glass. As she gets lost in her own thoughts, her physical self slides out of frame and Helen is blurred on the right. There's a strange comfort to her isolated world. When Helen speaks, it disturbs Evelyn back to reality. The technical filmmaking, art design, animation, and dramatic timing of Incredibles 2 are often great. Incredibles 2 is vibrant, colorful, and generally still has positive messages for kids. The amount of action and number of plot lines, while hurting each other individually, do keep the movie rocking and rolling. There's lots of variety, and if you told me you preferred this movie to The Incredibles 1, I'd understand why. Heck, my disappointment with The Incredibles 2 was minor. I just had a lot of things to say. Nothing was ruined because Incredibles 2 ends with the same status quo as The Incredibles. Wait a minute! What was the status quo? Did Helen go back to being a stay-at-home mom? Do they both work full-time as superheroes now? Does Jack have a super babysitter? How did these plot lines resolve? I know superheroes are legal now, but how did the Parr family's domestic situation end up? What is the ending to your movie? Incredibles 2's ending is light on details, but I'm supposed to make positive assumptions. Well, we've come full circle, haven't we? I don't want to assume what happened in Incredibles 2's ending, because my assumed happy ending for The Incredibles 1 was pissed on by The Incredibles 2.
Superheroes are illegal.
The creators have done it to themselves. They told me 2 plus 2? You think that equals 4? It didn't. Who knows what the creators will change this time? Oh, it's Incredibles 3. Superheroes are legal this time, but The Incredibles didn't have their government-issued license to go supering before engaging in this vehicular pursuit. The Incredibles can't be supers in the third movie. Do it! I dare ya! It'd be hilarious. I would love it. Everybody else would hate you.
That I understand.
Did Mr. Bird intentionally not give me a conclusion to Incredibles 2 so that Incredibles 3 doesn't have to retcon it? Well, that's progress.
Hey,
Here is the most ideal, yet generic, ending that I can think of for Bob and Helen. After the climax, Bob lets Helen know that parenting is a lot harder than he thought it was going to be, yet still rewarding once he got it right. Bob is sorry for belittling the work that Helen does at home.
Watch the kids, no problem. Easy.
Easy, huh?
Helen tells Bob she's sorry too for being a hypocrite earlier and belittling Bob's passion for superheroing.
So you can have that choice.
All right, yes, so I can have that choice.
In fact, she didn't realize how much she missed being a superhero until she got back out there. It's like a part of her was missing that she didn't even realize. Helen had tunnel vision. She was so high on her own PR and what others thought of her that she was blindsided by Evelyn, and she briefly forgot how much her family means to her. Like how Bob must have felt on the island in the first film. Incredibles 2 is essentially about Helen learning the same lesson Bob learned in the first movie, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could instead be about her finally understanding where Bob was coming from back then, and how much she didn't know she missed being a super. Then Bob and Helen make an arrangement to where they both get the appropriate super work to family life balance. Both reinvigorated each other's passions for family and superheroing, and that they both value those two different sides of themselves.
I think I just like the simple life, you know, relax a little and raise a family.
Settle down, are you kidding?
Reminding each other of the things that they valued way back in the Incredibles 1 prologue. That would be predictable, yet it's nice and better than no closure at all to their role reversal. The point of the role swap trope is that both participants learn humility. Their ignorant preconceptions about the other participants' daily role in life challenged. If one of the participants in the role swap doesn't struggle and gain humbling insight about the other, this makes the participant that does struggle and grow look like a joke.
Why did I get relegated to this, you know?
I turned to Brad and I said, "My part is so great."
Why are the filmmakers doing the classic role swap trope anyway? What is the point if they omit the customary cathartic, grass isn't always greener, wrap-up confessions between the two participants? I guess it's such a familiar formula that they figured the audience would just fill in the gap. And apparently they were right, because the movie was very successful and people like it. But filling in the gap myself is not that satisfying to me, especially when the gap is your character closure.
Why did I go through all the pain?
Well, that sucks.
I couldn't have done this if you hadn't taken over so well. Thanks for handling everything.
I don't think it's a role reversal. I think it's sort of a reflection of reality. I'm really happy to see Holly kick ass. That's all.
I second that.
Are we going to talk about it?
What?
The elephant in the room.
Here's the elephant in the room. Incredibles 2 lost a year of production time. Sounds like it was pretty rough.
We had a year taken off our schedule when Toy Story 4 wasn't quite coming together. Our story was a little more together. I didn't think it was much more together. And they said, will you switch places? And we kind of looked at each other and went, I guess so. Ah. Suddenly the pressure is huge and that plot doesn't work. And now I'm screwed because I have a release date and everybody's going, Incredibles.
And so we lost a year of writing.
Which is a lot, particularly when there are expectations for the film.
We were taking pages, off of his desk and putting them into production.
Is this good? This
Is
good
this
because we got
okay?
It's okay because we're going to go make it now.
And I'd say that one and that one are okay, but
we got to hold this one, right?
This one connects with the thing that I haven't figured out yet, so hold that one. The number of pages is probably 2.5 other Incredibles movies. You know what you're doing, right? You know what you're doing, right? Right? And I'm like, yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Fake it till you make it?
That's right, that's right.
Do you put more resources into making it work, or do you bail? And because the clock is running. And, we bailed. We had to jettison, and I was constantly rewriting the villain story. It was the last thing in the movie.
We made Raccoon Fight. It was the very first scene that we produced. Right. And then we put together the other scenes.
And I went for another idea that I thought would work and was great, and everybody got excited. That was our new idea, and then parts of that idea didn't work. The movie was going to have the raccoon fight in it.
And for a while, that might be the only thing the movie had. Yeah.
Well, I didn't read a screenplay because there wasn't really one.
Did you see the whole script?
He's the screenplay.
So we didn't really have the entire script understood until we were
Till
almost
well after
done.
the release, yeah. We waited for other people to tell us what it was about. Yeah. And they kept trying to get me to say, so, first screening, huh? And I'd go, no, it's actually not a screening. It's just a bunch of crap. And it's loosely around the theme of The Incredibles.
Swap it out?
Well, so swap it out. Swap Toy Story 4 with this.
Slop it out? Or?
Yeah.
Because that's what we did.
No. You got to make something. We got to make something.
Yeah. Well, you lose the time to stroke your chin about an idea. There's no way to kind of coerce it into working. You just have to go dead.
And sometimes that's the best way to make something, Just don't look down too hard. Just keep making it, and when you look up, it's going to mean something.
Yeah.
Deadlines are an amazing thing.
Could you take a year off your schedule? Of course we can do that.
And then we kind of go, how are we going to do that? I don't know.
And I mean, how was that a hard sort of? In terms of
the year has to come out of something. This is going to be ugly as sin until it isn't, and it'll be not ugly as sin right at the very end. I said it's going to look terrible. And just be okay with that. Yeah, 2 years left. Turning down on you. I hope you feel comfortable. You feel comfortable? Because everybody has high expectations, okay? Pixar respects filmmakers enough to say, when you're ready, we're ready. And I like that. And I hope they are happy with the movie. I think they are. It was very messy, but we came out with something that made some sense, I think.
But, a film's never finished, it's just taken from you.
That's right. Yeah.
You feel that way too?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No, if they'd given me, another week, I would have done more stuff.
These out-of-context clips seem pretty damning. They didn't know what they were doing, that they slopped it out. It would be very easy for me to use these clips to slam dunk on the filmmakers. It could be fun, but I respect these guys. Pixar took a year off their schedule because another movie was struggling, yet they carried on to the best of their ability, and they made their deadline with enough positive energy left over to joke about their struggle. The truth is, Pixar movies have these sorts of story shakeups all the time. I love Toy Story 2. That movie got totally reworked in only 1 year to meet a deadline. Ratatouille swapped directors to Brad Bird halfway through. Even The Incredibles 1 changed its main villain to Syndrome late in the production.
I'm still geeking out about it.
So this kind of behind the scenes stuff isn't novel, and it doesn't prove that this movie is objectively bad or something. It just turns out that the last minute changes made to Incredibles 2 didn't work for me this time. My suggestions are not meant to be this is the only way I would have enjoyed the movie. They're just me trying to be constructive in my criticism through examples. Okay, they made out great financially. They don't need my advice. I'm still curious what they could have done with an extra year of production time to streamline and focus on the story beats that mattered. if something is to blame for Incredibles 2, it's probably Disney. Brad Bird has clashed with Disney executives in the past. A behind-the-scenes documentary for The Iron Giant called The Giant's Dream described Mr. Bird himself rebelling against the new guard at Disney.
A lot of the guys taking over the films were not at the top of their game. They were intimidated by young people. They did not like being questioned at all. It was not the Disney that I came to work for. These bunglers tended to play everything so safe, which is a bore.
Ironic. Brad was volatile and passionate. We can change it.
I was standing up for the very principles that the old Disney masters had taught me.
Needless to say, they mutually, yet sternly, parted ways. The Incredibles 1 was made in 2004. Disney did not own Pixar yet. Maybe Brad Bird had more freedom back then.
And we don't have as much as Disney and DreamWorks in terms of time and money, but what we got that they don't have is some freedom.
But once Disney bought Pixar, Disney probably wanted a return on investment. Sequels.
They're stockholders, Bob! Who's helping them out, huh?
Under Disney, Pixar went from just Toy Story 2 to Toy Story 3, Cars 2, Monsters University, Finding Dory, Cars 3, and Toy Story 4. And all that time, Disney might have been eyeballing Incredibles 2.
Yeah, there was pressure, but it was a nice, friendly, not too pushy pressure from Pixar.
Well, they were friendly to you. Every time I'd see Alan Bergman, for 10 years it was, when do we get Incredibles 2? You're a producer, produce!
Well, from my point of view, they weren't too pressury.
Brad Bird had said he wouldn't make an Incredibles 2 unless he had a really good idea.
If I can figure out a whole story that holds up, I would be happy to do it.
These interview clips that I've shown make it seem like he didn't have a full idea. Mr. Bird complimented Pixar for respecting their creators.
Pixar respects filmmakers enough to say, when you're ready, we're ready.
When he was ready, Pixar was ready. It seems to be contradictory to what actually happened, but he smirked a little when he said, I hope they're happy.
I hope they are happy with the movie. I think they are.
Is Incredibles 2 another Matrix 4 situation? Was Disney gonna force Pixar to make Incredibles 2 with or without Brad Bird? Tomorrowland lost them millions. Maybe Brad Bird owed Disney a box office hit, forcing Brad Bird to make Incredibles 2 before he was ready to make it. And if that's true, imagine the company that's forcing you to make a movie you're not ready to make yet, then go on to take a year off of your schedule. I'm not saying that's what happened. That was just juicy speculation from me.
So we haven't confirmed there's a third movie doing it?
No.
I mean, I guess that's...
After Tomorrowland 2.
I think everybody's reasonably assured it's not a cash grab.
I do know that Brad Bird's animation career has had a lot of hectically rushed productions to meet tight deadlines.
Disney had 5 years, we had 2.5. We are literally in a race against the budget and time on this. You'll hate us in the short run and you'll love us in the long run. I've had sort of those dark nights of the soul on almost every film that I've done, including Ratatouille, and kind of came aboard a film that had been being built for a number of years and was just resisting coming together as a story. So I had to race on that film.
And despite his successes, he still doesn't have final cut on his movies.
I'm starting to inch toward final cut, and it's not quite real final cut yet, but it's close. But I've never had it, and I've sort of gotten to make the movies I want to make without having final cut.
But he says he's satisfied, so who am I to contradict and stir up trouble?
And just to put it in context, Tarzan started a year before us, and they'll be finished with animation in 3 weeks. With 40 more animators. So they're pussies!
He was dropping F-bombs all over the place and say, yeah, man, animation can be really great, but everybody's doing it wrong, and together we're gonna make something bitchin' and special, man. I said, I'm signing up with this bastard right now.
Mr. Bird seems quite opinionated and passionate about making American animation more respected by adults. I appreciate that, and I hope he's not discouraged, considering how much he takes online criticism to heart.
not what I expected.
You better not disappoint me.
If you think about it that way, you just want to curl up into a ball and never make anything. I knew that it's embarrassing to have your weaknesses discussed in front of everyone else. But I said, you got to get over this. Why are you so vocal? I said, well, I don't think this is being very well run. I actually like the fact that he had a strong opinion. People want everybody to behave all the time. Well, I don't think history is made by people who behave. You want to learn animation, do your animation.
I hope he keeps going. I still don't like Incredibles 2, but the movie clearly resonated with many audiences. Just because it was a bumpy, flawed endeavor doesn't mean it wasn't worth making. In a way, that's inspiring to me. This is my first long-form video. It has issues, but I kept coming back to work on it because there were a few moments and ideas that I thought were worth finishing the rest for. I have stopped and started this review on and off again. You know what? That producer lady was right.
Deadlines are an amazing thing.
Deadlines are a wonderful thing. Work on something, release it, learn from it, improve the next time. Hopefully it's worthwhile for somebody. Likewise, kudos to the crew of Incredibles 2. It was worthwhile, despite my negative opinion. Incredibles 2 is full of great ideas and potential, which is why I made this review. It's a mild disappointment with all the missed opportunities.
The world is what it is. We have to adapt.
It was fun to see the Parr family again, and there are some great moments worth revisiting. But Incredibles 2, as a whole, was overstuffed and undercooked. It's bogged down in setup, weak on story progression and character consistency, too mundane, played out, and repetitive, with a story that doesn't flow well and barely comes together, yet not in a satisfying way. I think Incredibles 2 undermines The Incredibles and itself. Just a safe regression to end up exactly where The Incredibles 1 left off. Frankly, I'm surprised that Underminer didn't show up again. I added that line for dramatic effect, but damn it.
If you want to stay for another 3 hours, I can tell you about all the other lame scenes that I did.
That's my opinion on The Incredibles 2. Let me know your thoughts below. If you disagree, then I hope you enjoyed a different perspective. Hi, this is 2024 AE Movie Guy. This Incredibles 2 review was recorded 4 years ago. What a mind job. It started as a 30-minute script meant to coincide with Incredibles 2's release week, but I stopped making videos. From 2018 to 2020, I wrote and recorded new sections for the review to go more in depth. I wanted it to be a big comeback video because I've been gone for so long. The review's runtime ballooned from 30 minutes to 3 hours. It became a Frankenstein mess, an impossible puzzle, trying to place all the new sections in with the old sections and make sure everything moved properly on the timeline. I gave up on it for years, and it discouraged me from coming back. But I spent the last few months to stitch this review together. I hope it turned out to be something. If you liked this extended review, oh my gosh, is this long? With all the rewrites, deleted parts of the critique, and flubbed up takes, let me tell you, it's 16 hours of recording. I'm not doing it this way in the future. Really? If you liked this extended review with full footage, then let me know. I enjoyed talking at a greater length with relevant clips for once. I hope it wasn't exhausting. Still trying to learn how to balance my voiceover performance properly. There was a lot of mic clipping in this review. Hopefully this one is a lot better than me constantly shouting at you. I'm trying to take your criticisms in the comment section seriously. Let me know if I need to tone it down even further and just speak more casually. Going forward, I don't think that most of my reviews will be this long. Right now, in-depth is a special moniker. Well, maybe you think in-depth is a lie. Anyway, what's next for the channel? Hey, don't push me, or I'll run away again, I swear. I completed and released this review for some closure, but I might stick around. Let's take it one video at a time. Here's the deal. 3 weeks. My next review should be out in 3 weeks or less. If there's a movie you really want me to review, leave the title of it in the comments of this video. And whichever movie has the most requests within the first 48 hours will be the next not in-depth review, and this video should be at least 30 minutes long. Preferably it's a movie that's already on home video because I would like to stick to full footage with examples from now on. That's a simple goal. Let's see if I can do it. or exceed it. And then we'll move on from there. And I've been away for a very long time, so if nobody comments, I'll just pick a movie myself. I just want to get back into a discipline of doing this. Speaking of which, I've been gone for 5 years. Why? I wasn't doing well personally. Wasn't confident in my channel's direction, and it was easier to just fill all my time with video games rather than self-moderate, self-reflect, and make positive changes. I'm still struggling with all three of those things. This channel started as a productive hobby. Then The Last Jedi came out, my third video, and its viewer count exploded. At the time, I was really happy. This was my moment. It was quite surreal to go from a video with hundreds of thousands of views back down to hundreds of views. What did I do right? What am I doing wrong? I didn't understand the success, and it inflated my expectations for myself. From that point on, I was always trying to claw back up to those viewer numbers instead of enjoying myself. Unexpected, fleeting success can really mess you up. It's made worse by the fact that when things get hard, I tend to just let it go. During that time, I really appreciated the positive feedback from the subscribers who stayed, and those who defended me against negative comments, such as how much I was yelling. But there was truth in their criticisms. I shouldn't have casually brushed them off. I was overdoing it. Yelling all the time made it hard to know when I was being sincere. And it also has the negative effect of making me seem way more unreasonable than I actually am in real life. So my videos weren't reflecting who I am. In retrospect, my Last Jedi review was probably successful because I spoke sincerely. People were starving for honest, negative reviews of The Last Jedi. There are plenty of those these days. My next issue? I was using screenshots instead of motion video. This was a self-defeating presentation style. It was harder work and produced a less appealing video. But my problems didn't stop. What else is there? My videos were way too long to appeal to those looking for a quick movie recommendation. My own cousin said so. Why is this 30 minutes long? All I want to know is if you like the movie. I censored myself. I had a quasi-spoiler section. Lots of beating around the bush.
You know.
The people who were actually interested in a detailed opinion didn't get one. My reviews were too long for a recommendation reviewer, too spoiler-phobic for an in-depth reviewer, or to justify the extra length, too unengaging visually, too loud for casual podcast listening. This is fine! Maybe I'm being too harsh on myself. After all, hundreds of you guys and gals were still enjoying my videos, despite my own doubts that caused me to quit. I'm not happy with myself for stepping away, but I am happy that this review exists now. It was much more fun to make, challenging my own viewpoints with a different perspective, clarifying some things, experimenting, and adding constructive suggestions. Even if you thought they were the equivalent of Zod's snap neck. Hopefully not. I want to practice making videos again. I'm still flaky. It's not just a YouTube thing, it's a me thing. Hopefully, this channel can help me with that. Give me something to organize myself around. Deadlines
You're an amazing thing.
I'm going to pace myself this time around and enjoy the process a bit more. Thanks for listening, especially if you listen to the whole dang thing. Wow! Man, talk about an internal character struggle. Okay. The outtakes are next. Thanks for listening. Take care. I can't believe I'm doing this again. Okay, gotta build your confidence up. Start speaking. We're about to record something. Oh my gosh. Incredibles 2 is a... Really? The first two words? This is going to take a while. Before The Incredibles 2 started, there was a 1-minute video apologizing for the 14-year delay. And without further ado, here's Incredibles 2. And it's Bow. The short film starts playing instead of The Incredibles 2. Brilliant. Well done. My review of the Bow short film, horrifyingly disturbing metaphor for a clingy parent. I dug it. Hi, I'm back. And almost 2 years ago, and over 3.5 years ago, and 5.5 years ago, and 6 years ago, but I repeat myself, and I'm not the only one, getting it on with the Underminer. I didn't know that hadn't happened already. The main characters are Mrs. and Mrs. As a consequence, there are Abrupt. Go ahead and read it again one more time. Speak more like a regular person. As a consequence, there are Abrupt. Wow, that's a bipolar mix. That's a weird thing to do. Find themselves on different sides of the issue and the table. It shouldn't be her job to cob. Thanks for coming Gee golly, what a swell predicament you're in.
Brad describes me as an inspiration for Helen.
If Bob is Brad Bird and Helen is Mr. Bird's wife, then Bob's disproportionate treatment could be innocently explained. It's humble to be self-deprecating and poke fun at your own flaws, but making your wife's character flawed could land one in hot water. Is that what you think of me? But that's probably not it. I should cut this.
Mr. Mom.
Woo! 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 Woo!
Perfect.
Woo! Very little of this visual humor and genre satire. You guys remember Shaggy snorting a hit from the whipped cream can? I'm not pulling this out of my ass. And LGBTQ, not to mention the pedophile. Shake it down, shake it down, shake it down, shake it down now. So why have stupors? So I have stupors. It's an over-the-top display. Over the top. Yeah, listen to me. Speaking of which, these guards will fire gars. The tension evaporated completely when I was told that all Violet and Hash. Did it matter? If you like this extended review with full footage, I love Kenny Rogers. My argument is that this is weak. My argument is that this is lame. My argument is that this is rancid. My argument is that this sucks. My argument is that this is awful. Anyway, back to the endless dinner. Don't worry. My argument is that I don't like it. That's probably enough takes, yeah.
I think that we're going over the same stuff too much in general. I would love to say, Bird has new idea.
I want to point out that Helen's mother-focused, oops. I want to point out the little twerp got so full of himself. There is a missed opportunity for Helen to reassert her belief in motherhood. Does a lot of pauses. It seems like Elvin, what is onus? Let me look that up real fast. Yeah, that was right. Onus was right. And this cowardice, is that the son of the boss for The Incredibles 1? It looks exactly like him. Why did the electric bike explode? Is this just a electric vehicle plug? Helen knows how to handle gas bikes, but this sucker's electrical. Woo! That power! Look at how the electrical bike explodes. Were there rockets on it? This is not relevant. Cut this. And all that time, Disney might have been eyeballing? Are we sure that Evelyn isn't really mad at her mother? The husband died and the two kids weren't worth living for. Winston and Evelyn totally got made.
I disagree strongly.
Well, so much for this recording. We'll see if I even like most of this. Okay, later.
This is probably not going to be a productive place for me to spend my time. It's feeling like it's a trap, so I'll divert.